Chapter 399. After a while, Elder Liang indeed came to Fenghe courtyard. He explained in detail the obstacles they might encounter in the trial, provided some information, and gave each of them a puppet-shaped magic weapon before leaving. After seeing Elder Liang off, Mo Tiange and Nie Wuxiang played with a puppet each, and didn't say anything for a long time. After a long time, Nie Wuxiang put down the puppet in her hand and said, "They're quite well prepared." The puppet was only the size of a palm, but it was very delicate. There was a faint aura on it, but it wasn't devil aura or spiritual aura. Mo Tiange couldn't tell what it was. However, it was indeed a very good magic weapon. Elder Liang said the secret place was in Mount Starfall, and there were some poisonous creatures around it that would produce miasma. With this puppet, they could avoid the miasma and save spiritual aura. Yes. Mo Tiange looked at the puppet in her hand and frowned. Are we being too sensitive? The two of them were lost in thought. In fact, there was nothing particularly unreasonable about City Lord May's behavior. It was just that they were used to thinking from the negative side, so they felt there was no reason for such a good thing to happen to them. An ancient secret place invited by a nascent soul cultivator, and there was no danger to their lives. In the celestial pole, how could such a good thing be known to outsiders? Mo Tiange felt she was being too suspicious. This was Yunzhong, not the celestial pole. How could she know this kind of thing wasn't very common in Yunzhong? Besides, weren't those dozen or so core formation cultivators unsuspicious? Judging from Yong Ruyu and Qiu Chengruo's behavior, Mo Tiange felt there was nothing suspicious about City Lord May's behavior. After pondering for a while, Mo Tiange said, "Let's do it as we see fit. Didn't we talk to Yong Ruyu and the others? We'll act together with them. If something goes wrong, we can use their behavior as a reference." Nie Wuxiang agreed. In any case, she couldn't figure out what to do about this matter, so she'd do it this way. Several days later, a maid came to Fenghe courtyard to invite them. This time, they didn't meet in the small hall where they met City Lord May, but in the main hall of the City Lord's mansion. Mo Tiange and Nie Wuxiang finally met other cultivators. At first glance, there were a total of 15 cultivators gathered here. 10 of them were devil cultivators. Aside from the two of them, there were righteous Dao cultivators, Yong Ru, Yu Qiu and Cheng Ruo. There was also an extremely reclusive green-robed swordsman. This person's cultivation was at the middle stage of core formation. He carried a long sword on his back that was faintly glowing. He had a very thin face, and expressionlessly sat in the corner, without saying a single word. Upon seeing Mo Tiange staring at that person, Qiu Chengruo approached her and whispered, "Fellow Taoist Qin, senior martial brother, and I have been in contact with this person. He seems to be very wary of outsiders and refused our proposal." "Is that so?" Mo Tiange raised her brows. There were more than a dozen cultivators, most of whom were devil cultivators. But this person didn't want to travel with Yong Ruyu. Was it because of his eccentric personality, or because he was very confident in himself? As if sensing that someone was looking at him, the man turned his head, glanced at them, and nodded stiffly. He then turned his head back, and continued to stare straight ahead expressionlessly. The four of them were somewhat speechless. Even Nie Wuxiang thought this person looked too aloof. It seemed he really didn't like to interact with others. "Forget it," Mo Tiange said. "Maybe this fellow Taoist really has an eccentric personality and doesn't like to interact with others." "Fellow Taoist Qin is right," Yong Ruyu said. "Since he doesn't want to travel with us, there's nothing we can do." The other three nodded and withdrew their gazes. "Fellow Taoist Qin," Qiu Chengruo looked at Mo Tiange and said with a smile, "It's been several days since we last met. Is the medicinal pill you wanted to concoct done?" Mo Tiange smiled. "It's done. If fellow Taoist Qiu doesn't have anything else to do, you can help me evaluate it." Qiu Chengruo waved his hand repeatedly. "I only have a rough understanding of the Tao of pill concocting, so I don't dare to evaluate it. I just want to see it for myself." Last time, when they were chatting, Qiu Chengruo accidentally learned that Mo Tiange also knew the Tao of pill concocting. He was very happy, and said he also liked pill concocting very much, so he wanted to ask her for advice and so on. Although Mo Tiange didn't like to be close to people, She wouldn't refuse if others treated her kindly, so she agreed. Young Ryu looked at the two of them with a smile and said, "Junior martial sister, you stay here with fellow Taoist Qin. I'll go to the side with fellow Taoist Tianqian and talk. We'll come back when City Lord Mei arrives." "Alright, senior martial brother, you can go." Qiu Qinghua smiled at him, pulled Mo Tianga's hand, and sat down affectionately. Young Ryu turned to Nie Wuxiang and said, "Fellow Taoist Tianqian, they can talk. Let's go over there and talk." Nie Wuxiang saw Mo Tianga nodding softly at her, so she said, "Alright." She was now a man, so it wasn't good for her to stay here confidently. Besides, she might gain something by talking to Young Ryu alone. Ever since he knew Mo Tianga already had a Dao companion, Qiu Chengrua's attitude became a lot more natural. Not only was he no longer guarded against her, but he also treated her very intimately. Mo Tianga felt that although Qiu Chengrua wasn't the same kind of person as her, her current behavior wasn't hateful. If she maintained this attitude, it wouldn't be a problem for them to befriend each other. After all, there were thousands of people in this world. How could she not befriend others just because they had different ideas? Even among friends, people had to seek common ground while reserving differences, tolerate disagreements with others, adjust their own pace, and look for things they liked about each other. Mo Tianga was startled when she realized she was thinking about this problem. She realized she seemed to have been thinking about the word friend a lot lately. Could it be that the better she got along with Nie Wuxiang, the more she felt she could have a few more friends? This wasn't impossible. In the past 100 years, she'd always been relatively unsociable. Aside from people like Luo Fengxue and Yi Jingwen, who took the initiative to treat her, she never thought about making friends with others. In the past, she was busy cultivating and her cultivation level wasn't high enough, so she didn't dare to easily make friends. But now that she was a core formation cultivator, she didn't need to be like that. "Fellow Taoist Qin." Upon hearing Qiu Chengrua's voice, Mo Tianga regained her train of thought. She said apologetically, "I'm sorry, I thought of a problem, so." Qiu Chengrua showed an understanding expression. He moved closer to her and asked, "Fellow Taoist Qin, are you thinking about your husband?" Mo Tianga was stunned, but she didn't deny it. Although she wasn't thinking about Qin Shi just now, she couldn't help but think about him every few days. On Demonic Mountain, she and Qin Shi made a blood oath to each other. Ever since they parted, she could sense Qin Shi's condition was very stable, so she wasn't too worried. Presumably he was still in closed-door meditation, right? Upon seeing her expression, Qiu Chengrua covered her mouth and smiled. He then asked curiously, "I see fellow Taoist Qin's way of doing things is very natural and magnanimous. You really don't look like someone trapped in love. I wonder what kind of person your husband is to be able to make you fall in love with him?" This question startled Mo Tianga. What kind of person was Qin Shi? How could he be explained in a few words? The more she spent time with him, the more she felt he was good. But it was inconvenient for her to talk about those good qualities to outsiders. He is a very considerate person. Although he doesn't like to talk, he cares about people in his heart. When I'm with him, I feel like I'm cherished and valued. Upon seeing Mo Tianga's smiling expression, Qiu Chengrua seemed to be thinking about something. "It seems you love your husband very much." Mo Tianga looked at him puzzled. "Fellow Taoist Qiu, how can you tell?" Qiu Chengrua said, "Your expression can't deceive anyone. Thinking about him makes you feel very happy and happy." Mo Tianga recalled her mood just now and couldn't help but smile. Indeed, even just thinking about him made her feel very happy. Moreover, when you mentioned him, you didn't talk about his cultivation level or identity first, but about his personality first. The two of you must have become Dao companions because you love each other, right? You didn't become Dao companions because of an elder's order, or because of cultivation between fellow disciples. At this point, Qiu Chengrua's gaze revealed a hint of depression. This puzzled Mo Tianga. "Fellow Taoist Qiu, what you're saying? Could it be?" Qiu Chengrua forced a smile. After a while, as if unwilling, she said, "My senior martial brother and I became Dao companions because of what Master said." Mo Tianga raised her eyebrows. "But looking at you too," Qiu Chengrua sighed softly and said, "Of course, Since we've become Dao companions, we naturally have feelings for each other. She looked at Mo Tiange with a complicated gaze. In fact, I really envy you too. You're not martial brothers and sisters, and you don't have any interests in it. Mo Tiange was silent for a while. Looking at Qiu Chengrua's sad expression, she finally said, "My husband is also my senior martial brother." Qiu Chengrua was stunned and surprised. "Then you too. Since we've become Dao companions, what does it matter if we're martial brothers and sisters?" she said with a smile. Fellow disciples naturally have more opportunities to get along and develop feelings than others. Isn't this very normal? Qiu Chengrua answered softly. The depressed expression on her face faded a little, and she looked at Mo Tiange with a smile. Perhaps because of what they said just now, she became closer to Mo Tiange. Unlike before, although they were affectionate, they still carried a hint of politeness. "By the way, where's the medicinal pill fellow Taoist mentioned? I almost forgot about the important matter." Mo Tiange smiled and took out a jade bottle from her Qiankuan bag. She said, "The ingredients for this medicinal pill are too complicated. I failed several times before I succeeded in concocting this bottle." Qiu Chengrua took it, pulled out the cork, and poured out a medicinal pill. This medicinal pill was bluish-green in color and carried a refreshing fragrance. One whiff of it would make people feel energized. Qiu Chengrua first observed the medicinal pill's color, then sniffed its fragrance. In the end, he dipped his finger into the powder and tasted it. In the end, he revealed a pleasantly surprised expression. "Fellow Taoist Qin, I didn't expect your pill concocting skills to be so outstanding. This medicinal pill has almost no impurities. It's indeed of the highest quality." Mo Tiange smiled modestly. "I'm just very interested in pill concocting. In terms of pill concocting skills, my senior martial brother is actually more outstanding." "Really?" Qiu Chengrua was surprised. "Your pill concocting skills are already comparable to the best concoctions masters in my Danxia sect." "Fellow Taoist Qiu, you praise me too much." Qiu Chengrua tasted the powder of the medicinal pill again, then poured it back reluctantly. He asked, "Fellow Taoist Qin, this medicinal pill should be used to detoxify, right? What's it called?" "It's called Refreshing Breeze Jade Dew Pills," Mo Tiange said. "It's used to detoxify, but it can also be taken to guard against fog and the like." "Really?" Qiu Chengrua looked at the jade bottle in his hand, hesitated for a moment, then said, "Fellow Taoist Qin, I want to exchange other things or spirit stones for your Refreshing Breeze Jade Dew Pills. What do you think?" Mo Tiange muttered. "This?" Qiu Chengrua hastily added. "Rest assured, fellow Taoist Qin, I definitely won't take advantage of you. You can name your price." "That's not what I meant," Mo Tiange said. "To be honest, the success rate of this medicinal pill isn't high, and the ingredients are very complicated. I only managed to concoct this one bottle." Qiu Chengrua looked at the jade bottle in his hand, sighed, and handed it back to her. "That being the case, I won't force you. However, if fellow Taoist Qin succeeds, please consider it." "Of course." Mo Tiange nodded with a smile. The two of them continued to discuss pill concocting for a while. Although Qiu Chengrua's pill concocting skills weren't as good as hers, they weren't weak either. Some of his pill concocting techniques were unique to Yunzhong, so Mo Tiange benefited a lot from them. Just as they were happily chatting, they suddenly sensed a powerful aura coming from afar. In an instant, all the cultivators in the room quieted down. This kind of aura, City Lord Mei must have arrived. Chapter 400. Ha 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 ha. A hoarse and somewhat shrill voice rang out. Soon after, City Lord Mei walked in from the door and cupped her hands towards everyone with a smile on her face. "Young friends, I've come late. Please forgive me." City Lord Mei looked like he was 15 years old. Not only did his appearance not mature, but even his voice was still changing. This City Lord Mei looked really young, but when he moved, everyone in the room was respectful, treating him as their leader. No matter what his background was, when facing a nascent soul cultivator or a core formation cultivator, they had to maintain the corresponding courtesy. This was true everywhere, and there was no exception. Once City Lord Mei finished speaking, All the core formation cultivators in the hall politely returned his greeting. Someone even answered, "We wouldn't dare. City Lord May is a senior. We've only been waiting for a while, so how could we dare to take offense?" City Lord May revealed a faint smile. Her gaze swept across the room, then she sat down on the master's seat. Seeing that everyone else was still standing, she said, "Everyone please sit down." Upon hearing her words, the cultivators in the hall scattered and sat down. Mo Tiange and Xiao Chunghua sat nearby. Nie Wuxiang and Yong Ruyu also returned to their sides and sat down. The hall was completely silent. Only the faint sound of City Lord May drinking tea could be heard. After a while, City Lord May put down her teacup, faced everyone and said loudly, "Young friends, I'm an impatient person. I presume everyone already knows why I've come here today." "Of course. City Lord May, we're also impatient people. Please speak frankly." The one who spoke was a robust devil cultivator in the middle stage of the core formation realm. Once he spoke, the two early-stage devil cultivators next to him chimed in. Mo Tiange had noticed them before. These three people should be together. The robust devil cultivator was the leader, while the other two called him Big Brother. Mo Tiange didn't know whether they were real brothers or sworn brothers. These three people's words and actions were very arrogant. When everyone gathered to talk just now, they repeatedly observed the Dao cultivators in front of them. Their gazes weren't very friendly. City Lord May faintly smiled and said, "Little friend Jean, sure, don't worry. I've invited you here, so I'll explain everything clearly." He paused for a moment before he raised his voice and said, "Dear friends, all of you have been waiting in Descending Star City for a long time for the secret place to open. Some of you have even waited for more than a month. I would like to express my apologies for wasting your time. As of now, 15 core formation cultivators have agreed to my request and are willing to go to the hidden place. The number of people is enough. Since that's the case, I'll open the restriction of the secret place today and let all of you try it out. What do you think?" Most of the cultivators present were overjoyed when they got the exact news. The only reason they were willing to stay here was because of this ancient place. Or else why would these completion-leveled cultivators waste their time? Now that he had finally achieved his goal, there was no need for him to wait any longer. City Lord May was very satisfied when he saw everyone's expressions. He said, "I'm sure all of you have heard about the specific information about the hidden place from the elders of Descending Star City. I won't say much about it. I will only say two things about this trip to the hidden place. First, this hidden place is an ancient trial ground. Every trial will last for a maximum of 3 days. After that, all participants will be thrown out of the hidden place. Therefore, please make the best use of your time. Second, I don't care what kind of rewards you obtain during the trial. However, if you obtain the Heavenly God fruit, please hand it over. Otherwise, I will have my ways." City Lord May's eyes were filled with power as he swept his gaze across the crowd. Prior to this, City Lord May's attitude was kind and his words were polite. He didn't have the slightest arrogance of a nascent soul cultivator. It was only now that everyone realized that he was a genuine nascent soul cultivator. Seeing that everyone was silent out of fear, City Lord May laughed and said, "My friends, there is no need to be so nervous. It doesn't matter if you succeed or not. As long as you leave the hidden place, I will give you a small reward for your hard work. Even though you are all core formation cultivators and don't think much of it, it is still a small token of my appreciation." Hehe. The strong demonic cultivator from before spoke first. He laughed and said, "City Lord May is too polite. You allowed us to enter the hidden place. What other requests do we have?" This time, City Lord May only smiled and didn't reply. She said, "All right, my friends, I'm sure everyone is impatient. Let's not waste any more time. Let's depart." Then, City Lord May stood up and led the way out of the hall. She waved her sleeve and stepped onto her flying magic treasure. Once everyone was out of the hall, they followed City Lord May and turned into rays of light that chased after them. At this moment, the idle cultivators of Descending Star City noticed a rare sight. In the sky above Descending Star City, more than 20 rays of light flew past. They were of different colors. It looked as if all the core formation cultivators of Descending Star City had gathered together. Hey, hey, everyone look at the sky. A cultivator who wanted to see the world in chaos shouted. There are so many core formation cultivators. What are they doing? Hearing his voice, people came out from the streets and shops to look up. Ah, it's true. There are so many people. Did all the core formation cultivators of Descending Star City move out? Are they fighting? Maybe they found some treasure and are fighting with people from other demon territories. TSK, so many core formation cultivators. How impressive. Yeah, when can I also form my gold core and show off? The core formation cultivators flying in the sky naturally couldn't hear these low-level cultivators' envious words. They were focused on following City Lord Mei to the secret place. After leaving Descending Star City and entering Mount Xinglua, which was also known as Mount Jialing in Eastern Tang, Mo Tiange felt the devil aura was getting thinner and thinner. Gradually, they went deeper into the mountain range. The fog was everywhere, so she couldn't tell where they were going. Fellow Taoist Mo, after flying for a while, Nie Wuxiang whispered to her. Do you remember the way you came? Mo Tiange tried to recall, but she was shocked. I can't remember clearly. The memory of cultivators was much better than that of mortals. They could easily remember an event that happened several decades ago, or a person they met. Mo Tiange had never experienced this kind of situation, where she couldn't clearly remember the path she had just taken. She carefully recalled. She felt she could remember everything clearly after leaving the city, but after entering the fog, she could only remember a few rough turns. She couldn't remember exactly how far she flew. Thinking up to this point, Mo Tiange looked at Nie Wuxiang. Both of their foreheads were covered in cold sweat. There was definitely something wrong with that fog, but she didn't know whether the others had discovered it or not. At this time, City Lord Mei, who was flying in the front, suddenly turned around and said, Little friends, this is Descending Star City's bewildering trace fog. Aside from being bewildering, it doesn't have any other harmful effects, so you don't need to worry. Mo Tiange and Nie Wuxiang glanced at each other. They both saw vigilance in each other's eyes. City Lord Mei was a nascent soul cultivator, one realm higher than them. He must have heard their secret voice transmission just now, so he deliberately turned around to explain. But his behavior, in the eyes of the two of them, made them even more vigilant. In a situation where City Lord Mei was present, it was actually impossible for them to communicate alone. The two of them couldn't communicate, so they could only ponder on their own. Mo Tiange calmed down and slowly pondered. She had always been used to doing things alone. Now, she could just assume that Nie Wuxiang wasn't present and make her own decisions. In any case, ever since she got to know Nie Wuxiang, the two of them behaved very similarly, so presumably, there shouldn't be too much of a difference. They were now in the bewildering trace fog, and City Lord Mei was leading the way in front of them, so escaping was unwise. That being the case, she could only be patient and calmly observe the situation. In any case, aside from City Lord Mei's own subordinates, there were 15 core formation cultivators here. Presumably, he wouldn't be able to deal with them as he pleased. With this thought in mind, Mo Tiange's heart calmed down a bit. She looked at Nie Wuxiang again, and the latter also gave her a meaningful glance. The two of them smiled at each other, and with a tacit understanding, continued to hurry on with their journey. The dense fog dispersed after a while. City Lord Mei was the first to stop in midair. She then said in a loud voice, Everyone, we've arrived. This is the secret area. There's a miasma below. Please take out the wooden puppets that I've given you. Upon hearing what she said, the other cultivators took out their puppets one after another, and began to wear them. Mo Tiange hesitated for a moment. She glanced at Nie Wuxiang and shook her head. She then took out the Tai Chi 8 trigrams from her Qianquan bag, and put it in her sleeve, signaling Nie Wuxiang to come closer to her. The Tai Chi 8 trigrams had the function of stabilizing yin, yang, and the 5 elements. In addition, she had already given Nie Wuxiang Cool Breeze Jade Dew pills, so it shouldn't be a problem for her to prevent this small miasma. They didn't move for a long time. In the end, City Lord Mei still glanced at them. Fortunately, she didn't pay too much attention to them, because there were also other cultivators who had other methods, and didn't use those puppets. This wasn't strange at all. Which core formation cultivator didn't have a few secret techniques? Preventing miasma. Such a small matter naturally wouldn't pose a problem to them. However, everyone had their own preferences, so they chose the puppets they provided without much certainty. Everyone, are you ready? Let's go down now. City Lord May said, then turned into a flight light and swiftly descended. The means of a nascent soul cultivator was undoubtedly revealed. Soon after, the several Starfall City elders she brought with her also descended. Upon seeing this, the others also followed closely behind them. When everyone stopped, Emotienga raised her head to take a look. This place was a small canyon. The mountain wasn't steep, and the terrain wasn't dangerous. The passages on both sides were very wide, and there didn't seem to be anything out of the ordinary. The place they stopped at was a small highland above the canyon. Behind them was a slightly higher cliff, and in front of them was a slightly lower basin. There was neither devil aura nor spiritual aura in this place, so there shouldn't be any spirit veins here. The distant past era's secret place was actually in this kind of place? However, this wasn't impossible. The distant past era was different from the current era. Perhaps spirit veins had already disappeared with the vicissitudes of time. My young friends, City Lord May turned around and said with a smile, "This is the secret place that I was talking about. From now on, I and several elders will use our secret technique to open the restriction. Young friends, hurry up." City Lord May didn't waste time and called the several Starfall City elders over. With him as the center, a total of 6 people walked down the canyon until they finally stopped in the middle of the basin. Soon after, City Lord May gave an order, and under his lead, a core formation cultivator used their secret technique. Immediately, 6 rays of light shone and pierced the sky. Chapter 401. When the light dispersed, a whirlwind suddenly rose inside the small canyon. This whirlwind wasn't big, so it wasn't even worth mentioning to the core formation cultivators. However, the aura coming from the whirlwind made everyone's expressions change. Aura. This was the aura of the distant past era. Although the core formation cultivators hadn't entered the distant past era secret land, they weren't ignorant people. This desolate and distant aura was definitely something left behind by the distant past era. Now, everyone believed that there was a distant past era secret land here. Emotienga and Nye Wuxiang glanced at each other. Both of them relaxed a bit. This aura couldn't be faked. So City Lord May's words became a bit more believable. When the whirlwind settled down a bit, a hexagram formation appeared in the center of the basin. When Emotienga saw it, she felt even more assured. With her attainments in formations, she could naturally see that this formation was a genuine distant past era formation. "Little friends," City Lord May said loudly, "please come here." The core formation cultivators on the plateau hesitated for a bit, but some of them stepped forward and walked down. Seeing that someone was moving, the others hesitated for a bit before they also followed. After everyone entered the basin, City Lord May said, "I found this transporting formation here. Once you enter the transporting formation, you'll be transported randomly. Therefore, little friends who have decided to move together, please enter the transporting formation together." Right. This formation can transport up to 5 people at a time. The elders should have told you about this, right? Upon hearing what she said, more than 10 core formation cultivators moved and stood together with their companions. City Lord May swept her gaze over everyone and revealed a smile. "All right, let's begin." For a moment, everyone was in a wait-and-see state. Everyone had a herd mentality. Very few people were willing to be the first to take the lead, even if they were cultivators. They all wanted to enter the secret land, but in the end, would there be other dangers in the secret land? This was something they couldn't be sure about. After a while, someone finally stepped forward. "Senior May, us 3 brothers will go first." It was the rather arrogant and burly cultivator from before. City Lord May smiled and said, "Little friend Jinshur is willing to go first, so there's naturally no problem. The 3 of you just need to step forward." With the burly cultivator leading the way, the 3 devil cultivators stepped onto the teleportation array. Suddenly, the teleportation array lit up, surrounding the three of them. The light grew brighter and brighter, and in a flash, the three of them disappeared into the teleportation array. Emotinga wrinkled her brows. Judging from the technique used to set up this teleportation formation, and the way it was being teleported, it should be an ancient spirit diagram. However, the teleportation speed was a little slow, and it seemed like it lacked spirit energy. Could it be that the spiritual energy supporting this secret place was running out? If that was the case, would the secret place still be complete? She looked at City Lord Mei and the elders of Descending Star City. Their expressions were calm, and they did not seem to have noticed this problem. After thinking for a moment, she shook her head. Forget it. No matter what, the teleportation array can be activated, and the spiritual energy in this secret place should be able to last for a while, right? It was better to let the future generations worry about this problem. As he thought about this, more and more people stepped onto the transportation formation. Of the 15 core formation cultivators, only 7 remained. Aside from the 3 burly devil cultivators, most of the others moved alone or in pairs. There were very few people who moved in groups of 4. After the green-robed swordsman stepped onto the teleportation array alone, Yong Ryu said, "Fellow Taoists, should we also go?" Mo Tiange and Nie Wuxiang both nodded, indicating they had no objections. The 4 of them stepped onto the teleportation array together. A moment later, the light dispersed. When the 4 of them saw their surroundings, they were shocked. The cold wind whimpered around them, and the messy snow blinded their eyes. They were actually in a snowstorm. Upon discovering this, Mo Tiange immediately waved her sleeves. With the help of the Tai Chi 8 diagrams, the spiritual aura fluctuated, sweeping away the cold wind and snow in the surroundings, creating a clean space around the 4 of them. Soon after, the 4 of them looked up and were even more shocked than before. As far as their eyes could see, there was a boundless ice field with no end in sight. Icebergs stood in great numbers around them, and the ice was abrupt. The environment was dangerous. Standing on the ice field, the 4 of them looked like 4 little ants. In the snowstorm that filled the sky, they were so insignificant that they were almost not worth mentioning. "What's going on?" Qiu Chenghua was the first to shout while looking at Yong Ryu. Yong Ryu frowned, seemingly also uncertain. She looked at Mo Tiange and Nie Wuxiang. "Fellow Taoists, in your opinion, this kind of topic was naturally answered by Mo Tiange. While releasing her divine sense to explore, she said, "An illusory formation." This was almost nonsense. They entered the ancient secret land through a teleportation array. Since this secret land was for the purpose of training, the unreasonable scene in front of them was naturally an illusory formation. However, the problem was that although everyone knew it was an illusory formation, they couldn't see any trace of it. "Fellow Taoist Qin, what should we do?" Nie Wuxiang asked. Mo Tiange didn't answer. She took out the Tai Chi 8 diagrams from her sleeve, shook her sleeve, and the Tai Chi 8 diagrams unfolded out of thin air. The Tai Chi 8 diagrams on the picture were dazzling. Upon seeing this picture, Yong Ryu and Qiu Chenghua's eyes lit up. They were disciples of a big cultivation group, so their eyes didn't need to be mentioned. They could tell at a glance that this Tai Chi 8 diagrams was a top-grade magic weapon. Mo Tiange looked at the flow of the Tai Chi 8 diagrams on the picture, then closed her eyes to sense the 5 elements and yin and yang around her. After a while, she opened her eyes and said, "Yes, it's indeed an illusory formation." Seeing how certain she was, Yong Ryu looked happy and asked, "Fellow Taoist Qin, you can see it?" Mo Tiange smiled, put away the Tai Chi 8 diagrams and said, "Fellow Taoist Yong, don't have too much hope. I can indeed see that this is an illusory formation, but this formation is very clever. I have no idea how to break it." Yong Ryu waved her hand and said, "Since it's an ancient place for training, it's normal that fellow Taoist Qin can't break it in a short time. If you can figure out the key to breaking it with just a glance, then your attainments and formations would be too amazing." Mo Tiange couldn't help but smile. What Yong Ryu said was right. Even if she knew some ancient formations, and even Xuanji formation books, she was a cultivator of the present, not someone from the Middle Ages. How could she break the formation in a short time? She was the one who asked too much of herself. Then what should we do now? Qiu Chenghua looked worried. We only have 3 days. Senior martial brother. And I don't know much about formations. So I'm afraid we won't be able to help. What about fellow Taoist Tiancan? Does he know anything about formations? Nie Wuxiang shook her head silently. Qiu Chenghua sighed. Doesn't that mean we can only rely on fellow Taoist Qin alone? Fellow Taoist Qiu, don't worry. Mo Tiange said calmly. Think about it. If you were alone and entered the formation, what would you do? Qiu Chenghua tilted his head and pondered. Alone. I can only try using some things to break the formation. If that doesn't work, I'll try fighting on this ice field to cause spiritual aura turbulence. At that time, I'll suppress the spiritual aura here and maybe I'll pass. If that doesn't work, I'll have to endure these 3 days and withdraw regretfully. You're right, Mo Tiange said. Although formations are used in the land of trials, they don't test the participants' attainments in formations. Therefore, we'll just go through the test as usual. In this world, there were not many people who were proficient in arrays, but every trial was inseparable from arrays. Therefore, the true purpose of these arrays was not to trap people, but to let the trial takers experience some kind of test. If the trial taker was strong enough, or had a clever mind, then they would pass, and there was no need to break the array. What fellow Taoist Qin said makes sense. Yong Ryu nodded in agreement. Junior martial sister, think about the trial methods in our group. Aren't they the same? Even if this is the Middle Ages land, it can't be separated from the scope of trials, so we don't need to worry too much. Once Yong Ryu spoke, Qiu Chengrua's complexion became a lot better. The 4 of them reached a consensus. Mo Tiange waved her hand, removing the barrier she laid a moment ago. She said, everyone use your spiritual aura to protect yourselves. This should be one of the tests. The other 3 people also used their spiritual aura to protect themselves, blocking the wind and snow. Nie Wuxiang looked deeply at Mo Tiange with a hint of a smile in her eyes, but she didn't say anything. She knew Mo Tiange removed the barrier because it was a bit strenuous for her to protect the 4 of them, not because this was a test. However, she didn't think there was anything wrong with Mo Tiange doing this. In this secret ancient land, they still didn't know the situation, so it wasn't the time to abuse their sympathy. She was also in the middle stage of the core formation realm, so she didn't need Mo Tiange's protection. As for Yong Ryu and Qiu Chenghua, if they didn't have enough strength, they didn't need to be responsible for their lives. Once everything was ready, Mo Tiange said, let's go. This is an illusory formation for the test. As soon as we move, it should cause spiritual aura turbulence. Yong Ryu and Qiu Chenghua nodded, and followed Mo Tiange and Nie Wuxiang, walking forward. The 2 martial siblings were in the early stage of the core formation realm, while Mo Tiange and Nie Wuxiang were in the middle stage, so they should be the leaders. Moreover, Mo Tiange had a spiritual treasure and was very familiar with formations, so she naturally became their leader. As the 4 of them walked forward, the spiritual aura in their surroundings began to turbulence. This turbulence became more and more intense, gradually forming a spiritual aura vortex around the 4 of them. This vortex wasn't obvious. If it were a circle, it would cover a very large area, so the other 3 people didn't feel it. However, Mo Tiange had the 8 trigrams diagram in her sleeve, which allowed her to sense the fluctuations of spiritual aura in her surroundings to a very subtle degree. If it could be said that the 4 of them had entered a test map when they arrived at the ice field, then the formation of this spiritual vortex was the true test. Be careful, Mo Tiange reminded them when she sensed the spiritual aura vortex was becoming more and more obvious. We've already triggered the formation, so there will be a test at any time. Yong Ryu and Qiu Chenghua nodded cautiously, and Nie Wuxiang also had a solemn expression. This was an ancient secret land. They hadn't forgotten this point. Ancient divine abilities were mysterious, subtle, and hard to describe. They weren't something current cultivators could hope to achieve. If they were careless, they might be defeated in an instant. They agreed to Castellan May's request to enter the secret land because they wanted to experience the ancient divine abilities and comprehend their mysteries. If they were immediately defeated upon seeing the ancient divine abilities, they would lose the meaning of this trial. The wind around them grew stronger and stronger, carrying with it snowflakes that rushed towards them. Although it didn't really hurt their bodies, their eyes and ears could sense the momentum that was rushing towards them. At this time, the spiritual aura vortex had already formed. It was like a big mouth that was about to pounce on them. Chapter 402. The moment the spiritual aura vortex rushed towards them, everyone reacted differently. Nie Wuxiang, who was wearing a boxing glove, threw a punch at the ice field. With a loud bang, the snowy mist on the ice field flew up and formed a barrier around her. Yong Ryu and Xiao Qingrua each took out a jade bracelet and intertwined them. The two jade bracelets combined into one and emitted a dazzling light from the point where they intersected, forming a powerful shield that protected the two of them tightly. As for Emo Tienga, she fumbled in her Qianquan bag and took out the white silk handkerchief. With a light wave, the white silk handkerchief turned into mist and surrounded her. Of course, these were just self-protection methods. The Middle Ages trial wouldn't let them pass so easily. After stabilizing themselves in the snowstorm, the four of them used their own methods to fight against the snowstorm that attacked them. In the beginning, although Emo Tienga was cautious, she didn't care too much because they had just entered the land of the trial. Logically speaking, this trial shouldn't be too difficult. However, not long after, she became more and more surprised. These snowstorms seemed to have intelligence. They could actually adjust the direction and strength of their attacks, according to the changes in the spiritual aura around her. The Middle Ages' divine power was indeed unusual. After fighting for several breaths, they blocked the snowstorm several dozen feet away again. Emo Tienga shook her sleeves and summoned the 8 trigrams of Tai Chi. Then she turned her wrist and summoned the heaven and earth fan. The cold wind became fiercer and fiercer. Ice chips and snowflakes hit the spiritual aura barrier around the four of them, carrying a powerful momentum. The four of them held their breath and focused, fighting against the invisible snowstorm giant. The snowstorm became fiercer and fiercer, as if there was a faint hand controlling them from behind. The four of them were able to handle it with ease in the beginning, but gradually, they became flustered. Yong Ryu and Xiao Qingrua were in the early stage of the core formation realm. Although they could defeat ordinary cultivators, they were only on par with the middle stage core formation cultivator, like Emo Tienga. As for Emo Tienga and Nie Wuxiang, although they weren't unable to handle it, their spiritual aura was slowly becoming chaotic. Calm your mind. Upon realizing this, Emo Tienga shouted, "We have to join hands." In any case, if they worked together and supported each other, the situation would be better than fighting alone. They wouldn't lose sight of each other. These past few days, Nie Wuxiang and Emo Tienga had developed a certain level of tacit understanding. Now, without saying a word, she immediately approached Emo Tienga. But what surprised them was that Yong Ryu and Xiao Qingrua also came over to them without the slightest hesitation. Emo Tienga felt a bit strange, but she also felt very relieved. When they traveled together, they were not afraid of being on guard against each other, but they were afraid of not being able to cooperate at the critical moment. Although the cultivation levels of these two people were slightly low, they were both smart people. If the two of them joined hands, they would have considerable strength. In this case, at least she and Nie Wuxiang wouldn't be a burden. The four of them met up, and the surrounding snowstorm immediately became more intense. However, everyone only needed to be in charge of one direction, so it was much easier than before. Emo Tienga unfolded the heaven and earth fan. Countless petals and branches flew out of the fan, entangling with the wind and snow in front of her. As her cultivation level increased, she gradually figured out several ways to use the heaven and earth fan. Inside the fan of heaven and earth, not only were there mountains and rivers, there were also flowers, birds, fishes, and insects. All of them could be materialized. As long as her skill was high enough, she could make them materialize and use them as fighting techniques. Seeing her method, Yong Ryu looked at her with surprise. The four of them met up. Emo Tienga had spare energy now, so when she saw his look, she couldn't help but ask, "Fellow Taoist Yong, is there something wrong?" Yongryu shook her head. It's nothing. It's just that fellow Taoist Qin's magic weapon is very powerful. Its control of spiritual aura has reached a subtle level. Even though cultivators from Yunzhong are famous for being good at controlling spiritual aura, it's not easy for them to reach this level. I'm just a bit surprised. She wasn't a cultivator from Yunzhong, which was what she said when they met in Sky Snow City. It wasn't strange for Yongruyu to have such an idea, but Emo Tiange just smiled and didn't explain much. This magic weapon came from Emo Yaoqing's idea. Emo Yaoqing was originally a cultivator from Yunzhong, and she was also a genius, so she had her own way of thinking about controlling spiritual aura. After Emo Tiange refined this magic weapon according to her idea, she slowly fumbled along Emo Yaoqing's ideas, so she naturally made great progress in controlling spiritual aura. With the four of them working together, the invisible hand, controlling the whirlpool of wind and snow, gradually weakened. Just as the four of them breathed a sigh of relief, the snowflakes flying around them suddenly froze into ice cubes and smashed down. Watch out! Nie Wuxiang shouted. She then leaped into the air and punched the air with her fists. Upon seeing this, Emo Tiange's heart trembled. It wasn't only because of the ice cubes, but also because of Nie Wuxiang's strength. Her fists that struck the air were almost illusory. With the strength of her fist technique alone, she managed to block these ice cubes. Martial cultivators. So this was a martial cultivator. What formidable strength! In the past 100 years, Emo Tiange hadn't seen many martial cultivators, and she hadn't seen any who reached the core formation realm. When she followed Second Uncle and wandered about, she once saw a martial cultivator. That martial cultivator was the same as Second Uncle. He was already more than 200 years old, but he was still in the early stage of the foundation building realm. He said martial cultivators were a bit stronger than ordinary magic cultivators in fights of magical power, but it was much harder for them to make a realm breakthrough. Those who could cultivate to the core formation realm were as rare as phoenix feathers and Qilin horns. He cultivated painstakingly for more than 200 years. With his martial strength alone, many middle-stage cultivators were no match for him, and he could even fight against late-stage cultivators. However, he couldn't see any hope of making a realm breakthrough. He believed that if a martial cultivator advanced to the core formation realm, he would be even stronger. However, he didn't have the chance. Emo Tiange didn't know what happened to that martial cultivator. He was just a person she and Second Uncle came into contact with during their wanderings. She understood this martial cultivator's desolate and helpless feeling, but she didn't have the chance to verify his words. It wasn't until today, when she saw Nie Wuxiang attacking with all her strength, that she realized what that martial cultivator said was right. A martial cultivator, who cultivated to the core formation realm, was a terrifying existence. If she didn't have so many spiritual treasures, if she was just an ordinary core formation cultivator, she definitely wouldn't be Nie Wuxiang's opponent. Thinking up to this point, Emo Tiange glanced at Nie Wuxiang with a complicated expression. After a while she couldn't help but laugh. She didn't want to enjoy the pleasure of giving pointers to Nie Wuxiang when she befriended him. On the contrary, she hoped to have a like-minded person with whom she could discuss and advance together. She was confident that she wasn't an ordinary core formation cultivator, and she also had lofty ideals and firm confidence. That being the case, the stronger Nie Wuxiang was, wouldn't it be more motivating for her? The strength of a friend shouldn't be a pressure to hold her back, but a motivation to speed up. Why are you in a daze? If you don't help me, I'm going to die of exhaustion. Nie Wuxiang's grumbling voice reached her ears. Emo Tiange regained her train of thought and showed a faint smile. The momentum on her body suddenly became stronger, and she continuously waved the heaven and earth fan. Countless flowers and trees knocked away the falling ice cubes. An hour later, the ice cubes gradually disappeared, and the spiritual aura in their surroundings finally returned to normal. The four of them heaved sighs of relief. Each of them found a place to sit down, and began to recover their spiritual aura. According to their current situation, they should have passed this test. An ancient divine ability was an ancient divine ability after all. In this trial, every one of them was almost exhausted before they could pass. However, Mo Tiange also felt a bit strange. She always felt that although this illusory formation was brilliant, it wasn't powerful enough. Logically speaking, an ancient divine ability shouldn't only have this kind of power. However, it wasn't entirely true to say that this wasn't an ancient divine ability. She indeed sensed an ancient divine ability's aura from it, and she also sensed its profoundness and subtlety. This was too strange. Unable to think of a reason, she shook her head, sat cross-legged, and closed her eyes, concentrating on recovering her spiritual aura. In any case, they were still in the middle of the trial. If they couldn't recover their spiritual aura in time, it would have a huge impact on the later trials. Just as this thought crossed her mind, she immediately realized something was wrong. Oh? How could this be? Xiao Chungrua's surprised voice reached her ears. Mo Tiange opened her eyes and stared at her. Xiao Chungrua's complexion was deathly pale. He stared at her, then turned to look at Yong Ruyu. Senior martial brother, I seem to be unable to recover my spiritual aura. I tried for a while, but the spiritual aura in my body didn't increase even a bit. Yong Ruyu's expression changed. He turned to look at Mo Tiange and Nie Wuxiang. Fellow Taoists, what about you? Nie Wuxiang frowned and said, You're right. I've been adjusting my breathing for a while, but the spiritual aura in my body didn't increase. Upon hearing Nie Wuxiang's affirmation, Yong Ruyu's expression became somewhat complicated. He seemed to feel a bit relieved, but he also seemed more nervous. He said with a heavy voice, Me too. Right after he said that, he and the other two people looked at Mo Tiange. Being stared at by the three of them, Mo Tiange also nodded. In fact, when she was meditating just now, the spiritual aura in her body increased slightly, but it didn't mean she wasn't affected. Now that she had Yong's spiritual aura, she had a chaotic body, and her body formed a world of its own. Even if there was no external supplement, her spiritual aura could still circulate endlessly. Because of this, the spiritual aura in her body recovered a bit faster than others, and she also had a slight advantage in fights of magical power. But just now, she only felt some spiritual aura recovered because of the circulation in her body. She didn't absorb any spiritual aura from the outside at all. As everyone knew, when cultivators meditated to recover spiritual aura, they could either absorb spiritual aura from the outside to replenish it or circulate spiritual aura in their meridians during the great circulatory cycle, which could produce weak spiritual aura. However, the spiritual aura produced by the latter was extremely weak, so in most cases, cultivators absorbed spiritual aura from the outside. It was also for this reason that spirit veins played a vital role in cultivators' cultivation. But now, when they were meditating and adjusting their breathing, they couldn't absorb spiritual aura from the outside at all. It was as if the spiritual aura in their surroundings had been silently stolen. If they were in the secular world, a place without spirit veins, this kind of situation would be very normal. However, they could clearly feel the surging spiritual aura in their surroundings. Strange. This was too strange. There was endless spiritual aura in their surroundings, but they couldn't absorb it. It was as if the spiritual aura was isolated from them. Even though they were core formation cultivators, this kind of situation still surpassed their understanding. According to common sense, this kind of situation shouldn't have happened. What went wrong in the end? Could it be that the spiritual aura couldn't be absorbed? Silence spread among the four of them. Everyone was contemplating, but none of them could figure out the reason. After a long time, Mo Tiange took a deep breath and said, We'll talk about this later. Right now we have to recover our spiritual aura. We can't delay any longer. With her reminder, the other three people seemed to wake up from a dream. They each took out medicinal pills and spirit stones. Since they couldn't absorb spiritual aura from the outside world, they could only rely on external objects. Chapter 403. 2 hours later, everyone stopped to adjust their breaths. With the help of spirit stones and medicinal pills, they had recovered their spiritual aura. But judging from the pile of spirit stone powder around them, it was obvious how many spirit stones they used. The amount of spiritual aura a core formation cultivator's meridians and dantian could hold was unimaginable for low-level cultivators. Several low-grade spirit stones could keep an aura-refining cultivator full of spiritual aura. But for core formation cultivators like them, the spiritual aura from low-grade spirit stones was basically dispensable. Only mid-grade spirit stones or higher could have an immediate effect. But mid-grade spirit stones were rare, and they were usually used to set up formations, or in emergencies, who would use them to replenish their spiritual aura. Therefore, they could only use low-grade spirit stones to replenish their spiritual aura. But even so, none of them had full spiritual aura. Since they couldn't absorb spiritual aura from the outside world, the speed of spiritual aura recovery was too slow, and they couldn't afford to waste it for a long time. Emotienga was the same, but her situation wasn't bad because she had a lot of restorative panaceas, and her body could still produce spiritual aura. Although it wasn't full, it wouldn't affect her strength. The formation is broken, Qiu Chunghua said happily after adjusting his breath. The power of the snowstorm gradually dissipated, and the ice field also gradually disappeared, revealing a cave. Emotinga smiled. Sure enough, the purpose of formations in the trial ground was just to test them. They didn't need to break the formation. But when she looked around, she became cautious again. They were currently in a cave. It wasn't accurate to say that it was a cave. To be more precise, it was a cave. It was a cave that extended in all directions and had many forks. Just where they were at, there were 3 to 5 forks. These forks were deep and serene, leading to unknown places. Fellow Taoist Qin? Nia Wushang asked in a low voice. Is there a problem? Mo Tinga shook her head and said, No, but do you think it's real or fake? Nia Wushang looked for a while then shook her head. I know nothing about formations, so I can't see through it. Fellow Taoist Qin. Yong Ryu interrupted. I think it's real. Oh, Mo Tianga was quite interested. What do you think, fellow Taoist Yong? Yong Ryu smiled and said humbly. I'm the same as cultivator Tiancan. I know nothing about formations. Therefore, this is only my speculation. He paused and said, First, the terrain. I remember that when we entered the teleportation array, we were in the Jiaoling Mountain. This cave seems to fit the description. Secondly, the spiritual energy in the surroundings is very stable. It doesn't seem like there's an illusory formation here. Mo Tianga nodded then said, What fellow Taoist Yong said is correct. I also feel the same way. Since fellow Taoist Qin also thinks that it's not an illusory formation, then this scene is indeed real. Qiu Qingrua said. Mo Tianga shook her head. Fellow Taoist Qiu thinks too highly of me. Although I know a little about formations, I don't know much about ancient divine abilities. How could I possibly miss nothing? When Qiu Qingrua heard this, he felt that it was true. How could the cultivators of today compare to the ancient divine abilities? Even a true array master might not be able to see through an ancient illusion array. In any case, since fellow Taoist Qin can't see through it, it means it's relatively safer. Qiu Qingrua looked at the fork in the road ahead and asked, What should we do next? What else can we do? Of course we keep going, Yong Ryu said. She then turned to look at Mo Tianga and Nia Wushang. Fellow Taoist Qin, fellow Taoist Tiancan, don't you think so? Mo Tianga and Nia Wushang both nodded. Looking at the situation in front of them, they indeed had no other choice but to walk down this cave and see if they could find any clues. However, Mo Tianga also felt a bit strange. That city lord Mei said this was a trial ground, and that if they passed, they'd get a lot of rewards. How did he know all this? He said he didn't pass the trial when he entered, but after they came in, they passed the trial, right? She hadn't seen any notification about the trial. Mo Tianga's intuition told her that something was wrong. She must have missed something. Fellow Taoists, let's go, shall we? Yong Ryu called out again when she saw that Mo Tianga didn't move. Mo Tianga nodded then followed behind them, slowly walking into one of the forks. The path they took was the one in the middle on the left. This path was chosen by Nia Wushang. When Qiu Qingrua asked her, she casually punched the ground, creating several cracks. The biggest one pointed to the middle, so she chose the middle path. The current situation wasn't clear, so it didn't matter which path she chose. So the other 3 didn't have any objections. As they walked, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Although Yong Ryu's cultivation level wasn't obvious, He was extremely meticulous. After Mo Tiange glanced at him, she felt reassured and let him lead the way while she continued to ponder. Since she felt she missed something, she had to start from the beginning. First, when she and Nie Wuxiang went to Starfall City to check in, Elder Liang of Starfall City came to invite them under City Lord Mei's order. Later, City Lord Mei told them about the discovery of the ancient secret place and asked them to enter the secret place to obtain the heavenly god fruit for him. Finally, he led the core formation elders under him to open the secret place and let the 15 core formation cultivators enter. After thinking about it carefully, Mo Tiange realized there wasn't any problem with the general course of events, so the problem should be with the details. Details, which step of the details had gone wrong? Fellow Taoist Mo, what are you thinking about? Nie Wuxiang's low voice rang in Mo Tiange's ears. Mo Tiange regained her train of thought and said, I think there's something wrong with this matter. Upon hearing what he said, Nie Wuxiang cast him a glance, and her eyes brightened. You also think so? Also? Mo Tiange frowned. Could it be that you? I felt there was something wrong after we set off, but I couldn't figure out what it was. Besides, City Lord Mei was outside, so I couldn't send you a voice transmission. Really? What do you think the problem is? Nie Wuxiang thought for a while then said, I'm not as meticulous as you, but you know my master cultivates devil cultivation techniques, so I know more about devil path cultivators than you do. First of all, I think there's something wrong with the way they opened the transporting formation. Since this is an ancient secret place, even if they used their own method to cover it with restrictions, they shouldn't have covered it directly. You should know that things left behind from ancient times usually have pure spiritual qi. Although demonic cultivators can absorb spiritual qi, they have to go through some special mental cultivation method. This way, they can directly cover the demonic path restriction on the pure spiritual qi, which can counteract the restriction. Is that so? Mo Tiange indeed didn't know much about devil path cultivators, but after thinking about it, she felt something was wrong. According to what you said, there should be something wrong with that transporting formation, but I saw it. It's indeed an ancient formation. At this point, both of them felt puzzled and didn't know what to say. Fellow Taoist Qin, fellow Taoist Tianqian? Qiu Chungrua suddenly turned around and asked, What's wrong with you? Both of them were preoccupied with their own thoughts, so they unconsciously fell behind them. Oh, nothing. Mo Tiange quickened her steps to catch up with them. Seeing Yong Ruyu's inquiring gaze, she thought about it and finally said, Fellow Taoists, you're native cultivators of Yunzhong, so you must have a good understanding of Yunzhong's situation. Is it really normal for you to invite irrelevant people to explore the ancient secret place like this? Both Yong Ruyu and Qiu Qingrua were stunned. They stopped and stared at her. Mo Tiange continued to say, Shouldn't they keep such a good place for themselves? Starfall City isn't big, so if they have this secret place to support them and train their cultivators well, it'll be very beneficial for them. Hearing this, Yong Ryu frowned and muttered, What fellow Taoist Qin said makes sense. So fellow Taoist Yong also thinks something's wrong? Yong Ryu thought for a while then shook her head. I'm not sure. Fellow Taoist Qin, I don't know what kind of place your hometown is, but in Yunzhong, there have been cases of people who discovered secret places and enjoyed them for themselves, but in the end, they were discovered by big cultivation groups leading to tragedies. Therefore, after City Lord Mei discovered the secret place, she didn't want to monopolize it, but rather took advantage of the other forces before they could react. It's not incomprehensible. Oh, so that's what happened. Mo Tiange stopped talking. In other words, she was wrong about this reason, right? But she believed in her intuition about this matter. It definitely wasn't because she was paranoid. She was sure there must be something wrong here. Fellow Taoist Qin, Nie Wuxiang suddenly said, Let's put it this way. Do you think this secret place matches the scale of an ancient secret place? Mo Tiange stared at Nie Wuxiang in surprise. Nie Wuxiang also stared at her and continued to speak in a hoarse voice. You're also a cultivator from a big cultivation group, so your knowledge is extraordinary. Do you think this place can be considered an ancient secret place? Emo Tienga was suddenly enlightened after hearing his explanation. She was right. Although there were traces of the Middle Ages everywhere, it was too simple to call it an ancient secret place. For example, the first trial they passed, the snowstorm on the ice field, indeed contained the profoundness of an ancient divine ability, but its power was too weak. It merely exhausted their spiritual aura, and couldn't cause any substantial harm to them. Upon seeing Emo Tienga's expression, Nie Wuxiang showed a faint smile. Although I'm not as meticulous as you, I'm a martial cultivator, so I'm naturally sensitive to power. I dare say this isn't an ancient secret place at all. It's just a fake secret place created by applying the skin of some ancient divine ability. Once Nie Wuxiang said this, Yong Ryu's and Qiu Chengruo's expressions changed greatly. Yong Ryu stared at Nie Wuxiang for a long time before she finally asked, "Fellow Taoist Tianqin, what do you mean?" "What else could I mean?" Nie Wuxiang said faintly. "Fellow Taoists, you two also have extraordinary backgrounds, so presumably, your horizons aren't low either. Think about it carefully. How could an ancient trial be so easy to pass? You should know that we're core formation cultivators, so we can use magic weapons. Magic weapons from the Middle Ages had great magical powers, so how could a core formation trial be so easy?" Yong Ryu and Qiu Chengruo were speechless for a long time. After a while, Qiu Chengruo said in a low voice, "Our Danxia sect also has a secret place, but senior martial brother and I are only in the early stage of the core formation realm. The sect advised us to enter only after our cultivation levels are higher, but..." Her gaze stopped on Nie Wuxiang's face for a while, then she said, "What fellow Taoist Tianqin said is reasonable. This trial is indeed too easy. Even if we're stronger than ordinary cultivators, it's impossible for us to be unscathed. Moreover, it also exhausted our spiritual aura." Emo Tienga suddenly interrupted. She stared at the three people in front of her and said in a heavy voice, "Fellow Taoists, I'm afraid we've already entered a trap." Chapter 404. No one spoke for a long time. Nie Wuxiang's expression was very calm. She was mentally prepared. Yong Ryu and Qiu Chengruo, on the other hand, looked defeated. They lowered their heads and said nothing. After a long time, Yong Ryu said in a hoarse voice, "Fellow Taoist Qin, aren't you being too presumptuous?" Emo Tienga said slowly, "First of all core formation cultivators who passed through Descending Starfall City were invited to the City Lord's mansion. I remember that Elder Liang said that none of the people he invited rejected him. How unusual is this situation? How many core formation cultivators don't have powerful backgrounds? Why would everyone rush to this so-called ancient mystic land and wait here? This is the first point of doubt." Yong Ryu's expression changed for a long time. Eventually she sighed and said, "Although what fellow Taoist Qin said isn't certain, it's not unreasonable." Emo Tienga said, "You're right. It's not that City Lord May detained core formation cultivators who didn't agree, but it's more or less suspicious." "What about the second point?" Qiu Chengruo stared at her and asked. "Later, we agreed to City Lord May's request, but he didn't want us to get to know each other at all. He even reminded us, intentionally or unintentionally, that other people might try to kill us in the secret land." "Yes," Nie Wuxiang said. "At that time, I felt it was a bit strange. Although we core formation cultivators didn't know each other, wouldn't it be easier to pass if someone was willing to join hands? Even if we had a falling out in the end, it would be between us and not them. It could be said that letting us core formation cultivators get to know each other and find allies was beneficial to City Lord May. But he didn't. From the beginning to the end, he didn't want us to get to know each other. If fellow Taoists didn't come to visit, fellow Taoist Qin and I would probably still be companions." Yong Ryu and Qiu Chengruo's expressions darkened. After a moment of hesitation, Qiu Chengruo said, "In fact, before senior martial brother and I looked for allies, Elder Liang advised us to go with trustworthy people instead of temporary allies. However, after senior martial brother and I considered it, we felt it would be difficult to pass with our strength, so we didn't listen to him." Emo Tienga sighed softly. It had nothing to do with him. Wasn't he being too kind by reminding her like this? especially when it involved the interests of Starfall City. No matter how she thought about it, she found it suspicious. The third point, however, is a lot of details. Emotienga continued. The mystifying trace fog, the way they covered the secret place, the loss of spiritual aura, and so on. If the first 2 points were merely points of doubt, these details are enough to prove that this secret place isn't an ancient secret place at all. There was dead silence. No one said anything else. Everyone was silently thinking about what to do next. Since he had doubts, of course he had to go out. But how? Among them, Emotienga was the only one who understood formations, but it wasn't enough to break them. Besides, no matter how strong they couldn't compare to nascent soul cultivators. Not good. Nia Wuxiang suddenly thought of something. Her expression changed greatly, and she took out the small wooden puppet from her Qiankuan bag. This thing. Upon seeing this thing, the other 3 people's expressions also changed, especially Yong Ruyu and Qiu Qingrua. Although City Lord Mei said from the beginning that she'd prepare the things everyone needed for the trip to the secret place, giving everyone one magic weapon was too cautious. In particular, the miasma wasn't too serious, so there was simply no need to do so. Emotienga also took out the wooden puppet and examined it carefully. She also used her divine sense to explore it, but she found that there was a layer of barrier inside that prevented her divine sense from penetrating it. This was the method of a nascent soul cultivator. She was even more certain that there was definitely something wrong with this thing. What should we do? Nia Wuxiang asked her. Emotienga thought for a moment, then turned to ask Yong Ruyu and Qiu Qingrua. Fellow Taoists, it seems you two don't major in the fire element? Yong Ruyu and Qiu Qingrua obviously used the same cultivation technique. At that moment, both of them shook their heads. Emotienga wasn't surprised. She threw the wooden puppet in her hand to the ground, opened a spiritual beast bag, summoned Xiaohua and said, "Xiaohua, burn it with fire." Xiaohua hadn't come out for a long time. Upon seeing her, it shook its head and wanted to come over to rub against her. In the end, Emotienga slapped it down. "I have business to attend to," Xiaohua squeaked discontentedly. Seeing that she wasn't moved, it could only obediently turn around and spit sun-real fire at the small wooden puppet on the ground. Yong Ruyu and Qiu Qingrua were a bit surprised to see Xiaohua. Spiritual beasts weren't rare, but core formation cultivators with 5th rank or higher spiritual beasts were rare. In particular, this spiritual beast didn't look ordinary at first glance because it could actually spit sun-real fire. Under the sun-real fire, the wooden puppet persisted for a long time before it finally began to melt slowly. The 4 people watched as the ordinary outer shell slowly disappeared, revealing the thing inside. It was actually a black crystal flowing with a mysterious aura. Devil crystal! Upon seeing this object, Yong Ruyu and Qiu Qingrua simultaneously exclaimed, their faces pale. Then they untied the wooden puppet they wore on their bodies and threw it away, as if it was the plague. Devil crystal? Emotienga stared at the 2 of them. Do the 2 of you recognize this object? Qiu Qingrua's lips trembled, but he couldn't say anything. Although Yong Ruyu's expression was unsightly, in any case, he still had some self-control. At this moment, he reluctantly answered, "There's no cultivator in Yunzhong who doesn't know about this object." Speaking of this object, we have to talk about a secret technique of Yunzhong's devil cultivators, the corpse soul technique. Once they heard this name, they knew it wasn't a good thing. Emotienga and Nia Wuxiang glanced at each other, then asked, "What's this technique like?" Yong Ruyu calmed down a bit and said, "This secret technique is just like its name. It's a mysterious technique that turns people into corpses while they're still alive and turns them into puppets." He stopped and took a deep breath, but he still hadn't recovered from his shock. The corpse soul technique not only takes people's lives, but it also controls their souls. It's extremely vicious. Between us cultivators, although we'll fight or even take people's lives if we don't agree, refining people into puppets like this and making them unable to reincarnate for eternity is a taboo. Therefore, although this corpse soul technique is also a strange technique, there aren't many devil cultivators who know its content, And there are even fewer who dare to use it openly. Not only as cultivators on the righteous path, but even cultivators on the devil path are also very afraid of it. When she heard that, Nie Wuxiang muttered, "So this city lord may tricked us here to cast the corpse soul technique on us." It's most likely so. Cold sweat dripped down Qiu Chengrua's forehead, but he didn't wipe it off. She said, "This devil crystal is an important object for casting the corpse soul technique. This object can absorb people's spiritual essence, slowly turning us into monsters that are neither human nor devil." At this point, both Mo Tiange and Nie Wuxiang's expressions changed. "Will it work if we carry it with us like this?" Yong Ryu nodded, then she shook her head and explained, "Fellow Taoists, you put this devil crystal in your Qingquan bag just now, so it's naturally useless, but my junior martial sister and I, after this object is restricted by a high-level cultivator, it'll absorb spiritual essence nearby. My junior martial sister, and I have been carrying it for a long time." Then Yong Ryu's complexion alternated between green and white. Soon, she clenched her teeth and seemed to have made up her mind. "It's not too late to realize it. We'll just lose some spiritual essence." Essence qi, in other words, was the qi of the soul. For cultivators, a person was made up of the body and the primordial spirit. They usually did not care about the soul, because the soul was something that people were born with. It was there at birth and would disappear at death. It was the same for mortals and cultivators. Moreover, the soul wasn't like the primordial spirit, which couldn't be seen or touched. It wouldn't be a problem for cultivators to cultivate or fight with. Spiritual essence was the vitality of the soul. If it lost its spiritual essence, the soul would slowly solidify, lose its vitality, and eventually die. However, according to Yong Ryu and Qiu Chengrua, there should be some kind of strange technique attached to this devil crystal, causing the person whose spiritual essence was absorbed to enter a state that was neither dead nor alive. Mo Tiange looked at the devil crystal on the ground, then looked at the other three puppets. These puppets were carved very meticulously, and their every movement was lifelike. However, her current state of mind was different, so when she looked at them, they looked ferocious as if they were mocking her. She thought for a moment, then asked, "Since we've already discovered it, how can we destroy it?" Yong Ryu's complexion was still pale. She said woodenly, "I don't know. We only know a little about this secret technique. It's been a long time since I've heard of anyone in Yunzhong using the corpse soul technique. Let's burn it and see." Nie Wuxiang, who had been observing them, said, "Every devil path technique will weaken in front of a fire spell." Mo Tiange nodded. She couldn't compare to Nie Wuxiang in terms of proficiency in devil path techniques. Since she said she could try, she might as well try. She continued to order Xiaohua to burn the three small puppets. Soon, the three puppets turned into three pieces of devil crystal, lying quietly on the ground. After doing all this, Mo Tiange patted Xiaohua's head and rewarded it with a medicinal pill. She then asked Nie Wuxiang, "What about now?" Nie Wuxiang didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked at Yong Ryu and Qiu Chengrua. "Fellow Taoists, do you want these devil crystals?" Yong Ryu and Qiu Chengrua immediately shook their heads. They just suffered a loss and knew very little about this thing, so they didn't dare to take risks. Nie Wuxiang thought for a moment, then took out a handkerchief from her robe. She picked up the 4 devil crystals with her gloved hand, wrapped them in the handkerchief, and stuffed them into her Qingquan bag. "Fellow Taoist Tianqian?" Mo Tiange was puzzled. Nie Wuxiang said, "If I can escape, I'll study it." Oh, Mo Tiange didn't say anything else. Nie Wuxiang had a deep relationship with the devil path, so maybe this thing would be helpful to her. "Fellow Taoists," Yong Ryu looked at them with a frown. "Since you know we've fallen into a trap, why aren't you worried at all?" They were actually still in the mood to collect devil crystals here. Mo Tiange's gaze shifted to him and she smiled. "What's the use of being worried? We still don't know what's going on with this trap. Being anxious will only mess things up." Nie Wuxiang nodded, then muttered, "Our opponent is a nascent soul cultivator. There's no doubt about that. Moreover, we've also fallen into their trap and are in a passive position. Our only advantage now is that maybe they still don't know we've discovered this trap. If we can figure out their plan in time, maybe we can escape with our lives. Yong Ryu and Qiu Qinghua couldn't help but nod. Their two companions were very calm, so they gradually calmed down. Then, according to fellow Taoists, what should we do now? Mo Tiange and Nie Wuxiang glanced at each other, then shifted their gazes to the two of them. Mo Tiange said, I'll have to ask you. You're both Yunzhong cultivators and disciples of a big cultivation group, so you must know a lot. Think about it carefully. Do you have any countermeasures? Chapter 405. Dawning Pill sect was one of the 5 great sects in Yunzhong. Although it was weak now, it had been passed down for tens of thousands of years and had countless disciples. Being from such a sect, Yong Ryu and Qiu Qinghua were both core formation cultivators, so their knowledge shouldn't be narrow. Since they knew this was the corpse soul technique, they should know some ways to deal with it. Yong Ryu and Qiu Qinghua glanced at each other and lowered their heads in contemplation. Senior Marshal Brother, Qiu Qinghua said hesitantly after a while. City Lord Mei knows our identities, so why did he trick us into coming here? Not only us, but among those devil cultivators, there are also core formation experts from the 3 devil regions. How could a mere city lord like him offend them? Yong Ryu pondered for a while, then said, This is indeed suspicious, but we did find devil crystals. City Lord Mei definitely harbors malicious intentions. But, since this matter is already in front of us, it's meaningless to deny it. We can only say that there must be some conditions that we neglected. Yong Ryu and Qiu Qinghua finished talking, then turned to Mo Tiange and Nie Wuxiang. Fellow Taoists, my junior martial sister is right. According to common sense, Descending Star City is only a small devil region in the northern Qilin country. Even if he's a nascent soul cultivator, he can't afford to offend the forces behind us. Therefore, City Lord Mei must have obtained great benefits by doing this, so much that he can ignore these forces, or give up on Descending Star City, Mo Tiange said with a frown. Correct, Yong Ryu said. I thought about it for a while and still felt something was wrong. Even if he used the corpse soul technique on all 15 core formation cultivators, it wouldn't be of much benefit to him. After being controlled by the corpse soul technique, a cultivator's cultivation level won't drop, but his strength won't be as good as before. I'm sure you too understand this reason. Mo Tiange and Nie Wuxiang nodded. It was obvious that there was a difference in power between a self-aware person and a puppet. Yong Ryu continued. 15 core formation puppets may sound terrifying, but they're nothing to a nascent soul cultivator. A nascent soul cultivator's strength is comparable to a core formation cultivator's. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that he could fight 100 core formation puppets alone. Even an early-stage nascent soul cultivator wouldn't be afraid. Exactly. Now that Mo Tiange had confirmed it, Yong Ryu continued. Then the question comes back to us. What kind of benefits can this City Lord Mei obtain from this matter that made him disregard the consequences like this? This time, Yong Ryu didn't wait for anyone to answer. She already said in a deep voice, I've thought of something. Since he refined so many core formation puppets, he must have a special use that can greatly increase his strength. Upon hearing what he said, Mo Tiange began to ponder in her heart. Yong Ryu's inference wasn't wrong. If there weren't enough benefits, then City Lord Mei wouldn't have done this. With so many core formation cultivators present, it was simply impossible to conceal their whereabouts. There were many high-level cultivators in Yunzhong. Every great force had several nascent soul cultivators, and late nascent soul cultivators weren't rare either. City Lord Mei wasn't afraid of the forces behind them coming to seek revenge. This meant that this benefit was enough for her to stand among the top cultivators. She wasn't afraid of late nascent soul cultivators. At this point there were 2 possibilities. First, this benefit could allow him to advance to the late nascent soul realm. This was a temptation no nascent soul cultivator would be able to resist. Second, this could allow him to obtain a supreme magic weapon or a heaven-shaking divine ability. That way, he wouldn't have to fear those late nascent soul cultivators coming to seek revenge. With this thought in mind, Mo Tiange asked, Fellow Taoist Yong, I have two inferences. Which one do you think is more likely? After Emo Tienga explained the two inferences, Yong Ryu wrinkled her brows and pondered. After a while she answered, the latter. Why? Emo Tienga asked. Because those core formation cultivators in Descending Stars City seem to know about this, Yong Ryu said. Emo Tienga was startled and began to ponder carefully. Even if City Lord Mei didn't explain this matter clearly to her subordinates, those core formation cultivators definitely wouldn't be clueless about it. After all, those core formation cultivators also played a part in deceiving them into this trap. For example, Elder Liang and the several people who opened the restriction. These things couldn't be hidden from them. That being the case, there were two possibilities. One was that those core formation cultivators were completely aware of this matter. In that case, not only would City Lord Mei benefit from this matter, but it would also bring benefits to their subordinates as well. That way, they wouldn't need to be afraid of the influence behind these deceived cultivators. The other possibility was that City Lord Mei didn't tell them everything, or used some other reason to brush off her subordinates. But if that was the case, why would these people go all out to help City Lord Mei? Cultivators were naturally self-interested, and devil cultivators were even more so. It was undeniable that some people had the spirit of loyalty in the secular world, but not all of them. Or perhaps, these cultivators had long been under City Lord Mei's control, and had no choice? This wasn't impossible, but based on Elder Liang's behavior, the possibility was relatively small. One side denied and the other confirmed. The conclusion was very obvious. Yong Ryu's judgment was correct. If they obtained a supreme magic weapon, or a heaven-shaking divine ability, then it was very likely that this magic weapon or divine ability could protect the core formation cultivators in Descending Stars City. That was why they went all out to help City Lord Mei. But the other possibility couldn't be completely erased. After all, people were alive, and they didn't know what City Lord Mei had done. Perhaps City Lord Mei used some method to force these core formation cultivators to help him. At that time, if he obtained a profound cultivation level, even those late-stage nascent soul cultivators wouldn't be able to do anything to him. What would happen to Descending Star City have to do with him then? Compared to advancing to the late stage of nascent soul and becoming a top-notch cultivator, what was a city lord? The entire Descending Star City would be nothing more than a dispensable chess piece. At this point, Yong Ryu knocked her head with a distressed expression. But I really don't understand. How could using the corpse soul technique to create so many core formation puppets bring him so many benefits? We missed a possibility, Nia Wushang, who had been silent all this time, suddenly said. Nia Wushang, who had been silent all this time, suddenly said, perhaps this magic crystal isn't used to cast the corpse soul technique. Hearing this, Yong Ryu was stunned. Not used to cast the corpse soul technique? Correct. Nia Wushang stared at him and said calmly, fellow Taoist Yong, could it be that this devil crystal can only be used to cast the corpse soul technique? Yong Ryu thought for a while, then shook his head. I don't know. Although this thing is terrifying, it's also precious. As for what it's used for, I'm also not very clear. It's just that this thing is too famous for using the corpse soul technique. Whenever I mention devil crystals, I'll immediately think of the corpse soul technique. That's right, Nia Wushang continued. I've done some research on the devil path, so I know some superficial things. Since this thing has the unique function of absorbing spiritual essence, it's definitely not only used for one evil technique. Moreover, some evil techniques can be invented according to this thing's characteristics. Correct, Xiao Chunruo murmured. Senior Marshal Brother, do you remember that rumor? The corpse soul technique was invented by a devil monarch with extraordinary divine power after discovering devil crystals? Yong Ryu wiped the sweat on his face. His complexion was deathly pale as he said dejectedly, this matter is becoming more and more difficult to imagine. I'm really powerless. Fellow Taoist Yong. Emo Tinga stared at him with a fierce gaze. What are you saying? Don't tell me you want to give up now. Despair appeared on Yong Ryu's face. How can core formation cultivators like us fight against someone who can invent an evil technique? It's not my wish. I'm really powerless. Nie Wuxiang let out a cold humph and stared at him. We asked you to think of a way, because you understand the situation in Yunzhong. We didn't ask you to bring about your own destruction. Right now, everything is just speculation, yet you want to end your own life? Raise your spirits. Otherwise, we can kill you right now to avoid you from damaging our morale. Chapter 406. Fellow Taoist Tiancan. Qiu Chenghua cried out involuntarily. She took a few steps forward, stood in front of Yong Ruyu, and stared at Nie Wuxiang nervously. Nie Wuxiang was now wearing the clothes of Tiancan. She was dressed in black and looked fierce. She wasn't a kind person. She stared at Yong Ruyu with a cold gaze and a stern tone. Her whole body was filled with murderous intent, as if she could spill blood at any time. Emo Tinga couldn't help but smile when she saw Emo Tinga's expression. This reminded her of the first time she met Nie Wuxiang. That was during Marshal Uncle Xuanin's soul formation ceremony. At that time, they were still just foundation-building cultivators. But Nie Wuxiang, because of a disagreement, attacked someone else. It was exactly this kind of imposing manner and threatening killing intent. Nevertheless, after more than 60 years, Nie Wuxiang today was a bit less gloomy compared to the past and a bit more imposing. Fellow Taoist Qin Yu. Seeing Nie Wuxiang's disdainful gaze and unyielding attitude, Qiu Chenghua turned to Emo Tinga, who she could talk to. However, when she turned her head, she saw Emo Tinga's smiling face. Her heart couldn't help but sink to the bottom. Could it be that he had chosen the wrong partner this time? This fellow Taoist Qin seems to have a good temper. But she's actually cold-blooded and doesn't care about other people's lives? Qiu Chenghua was very nervous. Emo Tinga smiled back at Qiu Chenghua, as if she didn't feel anything. She then turned to Nie Wuxiang and said, I knew I'd never be able to learn your ruthlessness. Nie Wuxiang snorted, raised her eyes and said nothing. She wasn't like Emo Tinga, who tried her best to control herself from killing people. Since she was a child, she killed countless people under Master Songfeng's instruction. So she didn't care about killing people at all. To her, Yong Ruyu and Qiu Chenghua were just two strangers. It wasn't a big deal to kill them. But now isn't the time to kill them. Emo Tinga pondered for a moment, then looked at Yong Ruyu with a smile. Fellow Taoist Yong, although I don't like killing people, I'm on fellow Taoist Tiansan's side. If you have this kind of idea, even if we don't kill you, you'll lose your life the moment you give up, in addition to your junior martial sister's life. At this point, Yong Ruyu's gaze moved, and she looked at Qiu Chenghua with a pale face. He saw the situation just now. Nie Wuxiang was incomparably fierce, but Qiu Chenghua stood in front of him without any hesitation. They had been martial brothers and sisters for several hundred years, and they had also become Taoist companions. They had been together for many years, and he knew Qiu Chenghua's personality very well. Although her cultivation was not low, and her strength was not weak, she had been too dependent on him all these years. If she collapsed, she would definitely not be able to survive. Senior brother. Qiu Chenghua looked at him with pleading eyes. She wanted to say something, but she couldn't say anything in the end. Yong Ryu sighed. Junior sister, I've disappointed you. There was confusion in Qiu Chenghua's eyes. He didn't understand what he meant. Was he regretting his actions just now? Or was he apologizing for his incompetence? In the next moment, her gaze became firm. She held Yong Ryu's hand and said, No matter what you do, I'll only stand by your side. You can rest assured. Yong Ryu was shocked. Many things flashed in her eyes as she stared at Emo Tinga. In the end, she sighed and said, Junior sister, you're still so affectionate towards me even at this time. That year, I let you down. What's the point of saying this? Qiu Chenghua's gaze became gentle. All these years, you let me control you. And I stopped all the women who approached you. But you didn't complain at all. Do you think I still don't understand your feelings? It's just that I've always been unwilling. Enough, you too. Nie Wuxiang coldly interrupted their affectionate words. What kind of situation is it now? You still have time to talk about this? Quickly decide. If you want to live, cheer up and think of a way. If you want to die, I'll fulfill your wish right now. Yong Ryu's complexion turned pale at first. He then looked at Qiu Qinghua, then at Mo Tiange and Nie Wuxiang. Gradually, a determined expression appeared on his face. In the end, he clenched his teeth, cupped his hands and said, "Fellow Taoists, I was impolite just now. Thank you for reminding me." Upon seeing his reaction, Nie Wuxiang's expression gradually softened. She withdrew her gaze and said faintly, "Since you want to live, it'll be easy." Oh. Judging from her tone, it seemed she already had an idea. So Mo Tiange asked, "What did you think of?" Nie Wuxiang glanced at her and said, "I think there are two ways to deal with this. The first is to find other people and see what happened to them. Maybe they'll have other clues. The second is to wait and see, since Castellan may schemed against us. But we didn't follow his plan and took that puppet with us. He must have a backup plan." Mo Tiange nodded while thinking. "What you said makes sense." She then turned to the other two people and asked, "Fellow Taoist Yong, fellow Taoist Qiu, what do you think?" Yong Ryu's face, which had just regained some color, smiled bitterly and said, "Fellow Taoists, I'll leave this matter to you. If there's anything you need to know, you can ask me again." He had just experienced a state of sorrow and joy, so it really wasn't the time to think calmly. Mo Tiange and Nie Wuxiang also understood the situation, so they didn't ask any more questions. After thinking for a while, Mo Tiange looked at Nie Wuxiang and said, "The two methods you mentioned don't conflict with each other. How about we look for other people while waiting for the follow-up plan?" Nie Wuxiang nodded in agreement. After a simple agreement, the four of them rested and reorganized themselves before resuming their journey. These caves extended in all directions and had many forks. In the end, the four of them simply let it be and walked casually. Nie Wuxiang was right about one thing. No matter what kind of plan Castellan may had, it would be revealed in the end. If they really couldn't figure it out, they could just wait. However, if they did that, they would be in a very passive position. Nevertheless, although they walked casually, Mo Tiange and Nie Wuxiang didn't let down their vigilance. Yong Ryu and Qiu Qinghua's cultivation levels were a bit low, but the most important thing was that their will to live wasn't strong enough. Therefore, it was better for them to rely on themselves. They once again walked casually into another fork. The leader, Nie Wuxiang, suddenly stopped and raised her index finger to make a shushing gesture. The three people behind her stopped at the same time. Mo Tiange looked around, but didn't see anything unusual, so she asked with her eyes. Nie Wuxiang secretly said, "There's devil aura." Mo Tiange was stunned. "How did you know?" Her divine sense was stronger than Nie Wuxiang's, but she still didn't discover it. Nie Wuxiang blinked mysteriously and said, "The magic weapon I stole from Tianyin's sect can sense devil aura." "I see. Devil aura." Most of the people who entered the so-called secret ancient land with them this time were devil cultivators. So it was possible that other devil cultivators passed through here? Mo Tiange thought for a moment then asked, "How many people? Where did they go?" "I'm not sure, but they should be coming this way," Nie Wuxiang said. "We'll just wait here." Their conversation was secretly transmitted, so Yong Ryu and Qiu Qinghua couldn't hear it. After waiting for a long time, Qiu Qinghua couldn't help but ask, "What's going on?" Nie Wuxiang glanced at her then said faintly, "We're waiting for someone." Huh. At that moment, Mo Tiange's divine sense also sensed traces of other people. She frowned slightly and said, "3 people. One is in the middle stage of the core formation realm, and 2 are in the early stage." Nie Wuxiang sighed softly and said, "Our luck's bad. It seems it's those 3 people." Among the cultivators who entered the secret area, there was only one team of 3 people. The strong devil cultivator city lord Mei called Jin Shi, and his 2 little brothers. These 3 people looked repulsive, talked frivolously, and were hostile to them. Now they were looking for other cultivators, because they wanted to see what was going on, and find out city lord Mei's purpose. These 3 people really weren't good choices. "Oh," Mo Tiange exclaimed in surprise. "What's wrong?" Nie Wuxiang asked. "The 3 of them are a bit abnormal." "Abnormal?" Mo Tiange furrowed her brows and said, They seem to be being chased by something, and they look very distressed. What? Nie Wuxiang was surprised. At that moment, those 3 people also entered the range of her divine sense. Sure enough, it was like that. At the same time, their whereabouts were also discovered. Those 3 people suddenly sped up and ran towards them. Mo Tiange and Nie Wuxiang were focused on tracking those 3 people with their divine senses, so they didn't say anything for a while. Yong Ruyu and Qiu Chengrua's divine senses were slightly weaker, so they didn't know what was going on. As they listened to their conversation and looked at their expressions, they couldn't help but feel nervous. After a while, the 2 people's spiritual senses finally sensed the approaching group of 3, causing Yong Ruyu's brows to wrinkle. After sensing for a while, he asked, "Fellow Taoists, should we wait here?" Nie Wuxiang answered carelessly. "But who knows if those 3 people harbor evil intentions?" Yong Ryu said worriedly. "After all, before they entered the secret area, they were hostile to us. So what?" Nie Wuxiang didn't even bat an eyelid. "If they harbor evil intentions, we'll just kill them." Upon hearing this answer, Yong Ryu shut up. After being threatened by Nie Wuxiang just now, he already knew this seemingly thin and weak fellow Taoist was much more ruthless than him. He showed his cowardice, and his cultivation level was also lower than hers, so he really didn't have the face to say anything at this time. As they talked, those 3 people got closer and closer. Finally, they heard footsteps coming from inside the cave. Mo Tiange immediately frowned. Based on the messy footsteps, their situation should be very bad. Did they encounter something terrible? She only had time to think about this when the 3 devil cultivators appeared at the end of a fork in the road. As soon as he saw the 4 of them, the strong man in the lead was overjoyed. He led his 2 younger brothers and rushed towards them. "Fellow Taoists, please help us." None of the 4 people made a sound. They clearly remembered the attitude these 3 people had before they entered the secret area. Now that they saw them, they actually came to ask for help so enthusiastically. No matter how they looked at it, it was very unusual. The 3 people stopped in front of them. The strong cultivator in the lead seemed to notice their vigilance, so he said anxiously, "Fellow Taoists, there's a monster in this cave. If you don't help us, that monster will attack you in the end." Chapter 407. The 3 devil cultivators looked back nervously from time to time. Seeing that the 4 of them didn't respond, the strong devil cultivator said anxiously, "Fellow Taoists, it'll be too late if you hesitate." He was about to approach the 4 of them. Nie Wuxiang raised her hand and blocked their way. The strong devil cultivator said anxiously, "What do you mean?" Nie Wuxiang glanced at them and said indifferently, "Why should we believe you? You." Her attitude wasn't polite at all. The strong devil cultivator widened his eyes and looked angry. "Big brother." The 2 devil cultivators behind him reminded him in a low voice, "Now's not the time to fight." The strong devil cultivator's face turned red, but in the end he swallowed his anger and said, "Fellow Taoist, the 3 of us found a monster here. This monster is very powerful and cruel. The 3 of us were no match for it when we encountered it. Although there are 4 of you, you're definitely no match for it. It's better for us to join forces." "Monster?" Mo Tiange raised her eyebrows and said, "What monster? Why didn't I feel it?" Her divine sense wasn't weak, so there was no reason she couldn't feel anything. "Fellow Taoists, please believe us." An early-stage core formation cultivator behind the strong devil cultivator said eagerly, "Just an hour ago we passed the first test. Not long after we arrived here, we encountered a monster. We couldn't feel its momentum, so we took it lightly in the beginning. But when we met face to face, we couldn't resist it at all." Mo Tiange and Nie Wuxiang glanced at each other and saw astonishment in each other's eyes. "Fellow Taoists, what does the monster you're talking about look like?" Hearing Mo Tiange's gentle voice, their attitudes softened a bit. The 3 devil cultivators were overjoyed. The strong devil cultivator said, "This monster doesn't have a body. At first glance, it looks like a strange aura. When we passed the first test, our devil aura was exhausted and hadn't fully recovered. When we encountered this monster, we wanted to repel it, But no matter what secret technique or magic weapon we used, we couldn't disperse it. Our devil aura was even absorbed. Emo Tienga's and the others' expressions changed slightly. A thought flashed in Emo Tienga's mind as she paid attention to the message. So to say, after you entered the secret place, you couldn't recover the devil aura inside your bodies on your own? The burly devil cultivator hesitated for a moment before nodding. Yes. This matter couldn't be hidden from others. The three of them could tell at a glance. Emo Tienga and Nie Wuxiang glanced at each other. Both of them showed expressions of as expected. Other than that, did you notice anything unusual? The burly man was stunned and confused. What does fellow Taoist mean? What I mean is, don't you think there's something strange about this secret place? Strange? The brawny man was dumbfounded. He didn't say it was strange, but a monster. What was going on? Big brother. An early core formation realm cultivator behind him whispered. Now that you mention it, I do feel a little strange. Oh. Emo Tienga shifted her gaze towards the cultivator, who looked a bit scared. Fellow Taoist, what did you notice? That person glanced at the burly man in the lead. Seeing that he had no intention of stopping them, he said, I feel that the divine ability of this secret place isn't mysterious enough. Emo Tienga's eyes brightened. She didn't expect this timid cultivator to have such insight. The burly man frowned and glared at him unhappily. What's so strange about that? Maybe the divine ability of this secret place isn't that powerful. That's right. Besides, Big Brother even used his trump card to protect us. Another early core formation devil cultivator chimed in. But the devil cultivator objected in a low voice. But even he himself wasn't confident. He only managed to say 2 words before he saw the burly man's expression and swallowed the rest of his words. Emo Tienga frowned and said, This matter is very important. Please tell us the truth. As she spoke, she cast a glance at the burly man in the lead. Upon hearing her firm tone, the burly man hesitated for a moment, but in the end he asked, Did you notice something wrong? Before Emo Tienga could say anything, Nie Wuxiang already took a step forward. She stretched out her claw, wanting to lift the man's sleeve. The burly man was startled. He abruptly retreated, took out his magic weapon and shouted, What do you want to do? Nie Wuxiang didn't say anything. Her figure moved, and she was already close to the burly man. At such a close distance, who could move faster than a martial cultivator? The burly man only felt the hem of his robe move, and something was already hooked off. The puppet fell to the ground with a bang. Nie Wuxiang glanced at Emo Tienga. Emo Tienga understood, so she released Xiaohua again and patted its head. Xiaohua, use fire to burn it. You. Seeing that they didn't seem hostile, the burly man was puzzled. What's wrong with this thing? Emo Tienga and Nie Wuxiang didn't answer. They would soon know the answer. After burning the puppet's surface, sure enough, there was a magic crystal inside. The 3 devil cultivators' expressions suddenly changed when they saw this thing. It seems you know what this thing is. Nie Wuxiang coldly stared at the 3 devil cultivators' expressions. Now you know how serious the matter is, right? After you entered the secret place, tell me everything in detail about what happened. When they finally reacted, the other 2 devil cultivators hurriedly threw away the puppets they wore on their bodies and looked at the burly man in the lead. Big brother, this. The burly man's complexion alternated between green and white. He looked at the magic crystal on the ground, and then at Emo Tienga and Nie Wuxiang's expressions. He clenched his teeth and said, Mei Feng. Turns out she was just fooling us. Humph. Although we 3 brothers are only core formation cultivators, our Black Mountain City isn't that easy to bully. It seemed the 3 of them also had a backer, which confirmed Yong Ryu's words. Although their cultivation levels weren't high, core formation cultivators like them couldn't afford to offend people in Descending Star City. The burly man turned towards Emo Tienga and the others. His attitude immediately became a lot friendlier. Unlike before when he was forced by the situation and had no other choice. Fellow Taoists, we offended you earlier. If it weren't for your reminder, I'm afraid we brothers would have fallen into someone's trap today. The burly man raised his hand to greet them. My name is Jin Shi, and these are my 2 brothers, Mu Shi and Yu Gui. were cultivators from Black Mountain City. Emotienga had heard that Black Mountain City was one of the northern Chilean country's 7 small devil domains. At this moment, the 4 of them returned the greeting and reported their names. After the formal greeting, Jin Shi impatiently asked, "Fellow Taoists, how did you find this magic crystal?" "That's unexpected." Emotienga changed the topic and asked, "This? Fellow Taoist Mushi, what did you think was strange before? This is an important matter, so please explain it to us one by one." Of course, now that he had obtained Jin Shi's permission, this devil path cultivator called Mushi no longer had any scruples. He spoke frankly with assurance. "First of all, among the 3 of us, apart from Big Brother, who has a high cultivation level, Yugue and I only have ordinary strength. We originally thought we wouldn't be able to pass the first test, but in the end, it was more daunting than dangerous. After we passed the test, I thought about it carefully and realized that although the first test seemed mysterious, its power was still lacking. Originally, Yugue and I couldn't go on, but the spell in the test suddenly weakened, as if it deliberately let us pass." Emotienga nodded. This Mushi was very meticulous. If it was someone careless, they might have skipped the test. Many people would casually find a reason when they encountered something unreasonable, telling themselves it should be reasonable. Secondly, after we passed the first test and entered this place, we've encountered several groups of people. In total, more than half of them passed the test. This is really unusual. Upon hearing this, Nie Wuxiang immediately interrupted him. "Did you encounter other people?" "Yes." The one who answered was Jin Shi. "When we arrived here, we encountered 3 people in total. If we count the 7 of us, there are 10 people in total. And this doesn't include those we didn't encounter." Nie Wuxiang looked at Emotienga. The 2 of them didn't know what to say. What did City Lord May warn them before this? She said the test in this ancient secret place was extremely difficult, and that no one in Descending Star City could pass it. Although they only passed the first test, the difference in difficulty was too big. Of course, there was still one difficulty. Both spiritual aura and devil aura couldn't recover on their own. If this continued, it was very likely that none of them could pass the test. However, City Lord May didn't warn them about this at all. After a long silence, Yongryu, who hadn't said anything, finally spoke. "Then, what's the matter with the monster you mentioned before? Did you run away when you realized you couldn't defeat it? Did it chase after you? Aside from magic weapons being unable to deal with it, what characteristics did it have?" The one who answered was still Mushi. He was obviously the most attentive among the 3 people. "Not long after we arrived here, we found that monster. At first, we thought it was the devil cultivator's test City Lord May talked about. However, after we approached it, we realized in just a few breaths' time that we couldn't judge the monster's strength by its aura. Since we couldn't defeat it, we ran away. The monster chased after us, but its speed wasn't fast. When we realized this, we felt relieved. However, it didn't take long for us to realize that although it was slow, its movements were mysterious, and it actually chased after us. After that, no matter how long we ran, it would appear again. It was like a ghost that we couldn't shake off." An astonished expression appeared on Yongryu's face. "There's actually such a strange thing in this world." "Yes," Jinshi said. "That's why we can only call it a monster. We brothers are experienced and knowledgeable, but this is the first time we've seen this kind of thing. Right when we ran away, we met a fellow devil cultivator. He didn't believe us, but in just a few breaths' time, he was swallowed by this monster. Not even a bit of him was left. He turned into a mass of devil aura and completely disappeared." Yongryu's expression changed. This, Emotienga and Nie Wuxiang also looked shocked. A core formation cultivator was swallowed in just a few breaths' time, and not even his bones were left. What kind of thing was this monster? Things are getting more and more complicated. After a long time, Emotienga scratched her head. While pondering, she said slowly, "A nascent soul cultivator, who tricked us into a trap full of lies. Every one of us had devil crystals that could absorb spiritual aura that couldn't be recovered. Now there was also this kind of monster. What did City Lord May want to do?" Chapter 408. No matter what City Lord May wanted to do, they were now turtles in a jar. If they wanted to escape, they had to crawl out of the jar or break it. However, whether they wanted to crawl out or break the jar, it wasn't easy because the cultivation level of the person who set up the jar was much higher than theirs. Moreover, they were already trapped in the jar and were in an extremely passive position. Emotienga even thought that City Lord May might be watching them from the outside right now, as if he was watching a fish in a fish tank. No matter how they swam, they couldn't escape from his palm. This kind of feeling was really unpleasant, but it was a fact that the other party's strength was higher than theirs, so they had no choice but to endure it. Fellow Taoist Qin, Yongryu whispered, "What should we do now?" That monster isn't a problem," Nia Wushang answered. According to what these fellow Taoists said, no matter how we run, we'll be found eventually. That being the case, it's useless for us to run. Besides, its speed is slow, so even if we can't defeat it, we can still run. That being the case, we might as well wait here and see what that thing is. If we can't defeat it, it won't be too late to think of a way out. Emotienga expressed her approval. According to the description of these three devil cultivators, that monster really couldn't escape, so they could only do this. Fellow Taoists, what do you think? Jinshi said, "Your decision is in line with mine." The three brothers' breaths were unstable, and the devil aura inside their bodies was insufficient. They needed to rest for a while, even if it meant taking a few medicinal pills to replenish their devil aura. Since no one had any objections, the seven of them found a safe place to rest for the time being. Fellow Taoist Emotienga, who was sitting back to back with Nia Wushang in the passage, heard Nia Wushang's voice transmission. And Emotienga, who was still meditating and adjusting her breath, answered softly. "Is it possible that City Lord May's purpose is related to that monster?" Nia Wushang's words made Emotienga pause. She thought for a moment, then asked, "Why do you say that?" City Lord May must know about that monster's existence. That being the case, why did he lure us here? Why did he want us to kill that thing? That's obviously impossible. According to what the three of them said, I'm afraid we're no match for this thing. Upon hearing what Nia Wushang said, a thought flashed through Emotienga's mind. You're saying, he deceived us into coming here to feed that monster? Yes, that's possible. Nia Wushang said. If this monster is his pet, then he has to find some food for it every once in a while. Emotienga suddenly felt her blood run cold. In that case, they weren't even fish but earthworms thrown into the fish tank for the fish to prey on. After thinking for a while, she composed herself and said, "It's not impossible. If this was the truth, then how could the magic crystal and the environment where spiritual energy could not be restored be explained? Also, if he only wanted to feed them, he could have just kidnapped the nomadic cultivators who were passing by the city. Why did he have to make a move on the completion-leveled cultivators? Wouldn't we be offending those major powers for no reason?" Nia Wushang was silent, as if she was thinking. After a while she answered, "That monster's speed is very slow, so we'll be devoured in the end if we can't restore our spiritual energy. As for why he even targeted those core formation cultivators with extraordinary backgrounds, I think it's because he could only do it once. Moreover, just like we guessed, the benefits were so great that he didn't care about it at all. As for the magic crystal, I can't explain it. After all, this was just their speculation. Without enough information, it was impossible for them to miss out on anything." After a while, Nia Wushang still didn't get an answer from Emotienga, so she couldn't help but ask, "What about you? What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking whether that monster can be eliminated or not." Nia Wushang's spirit was lifted. "Can you think of a way?" Devouring and absorbing devil aura. Logically speaking, spiritual aura is the same, right? So if we encounter it, our spiritual aura will also be devoured. What if it's dead aura? Nia Wushang was stunned. Emotienga sighed. It'd be easy if Ling Yunhe was here. Ling Yunhe's spiritual beast, the vulture, was full of dead aura. No matter how powerful this monster was, it couldn't absorb dead aura, right? Nia Wushang was disappointed. I thought you had a way to get dead aura. Emotinga smiled bitterly. Where can I get dead aura? It was just a thought. Unfortunately, when she was in Carefree Valley, she didn't go to the Black Tortoise Temple. Otherwise, she might have found a stone tablet similar to the one in the Divine Dragon Temple, and found the secret of dead aura. Of course, thinking about this now was useless. Even if she went to the Black Tortoise Temple at that time, she might not be able to find the secret. Emotinga felt a bit of a headache when she thought about this. Did she have to use that trick again this time? It wasn't a good thing to rely too much on the virtual sky world. Fellow Taoist Nya and Nya Wuxiang seemed to be still thinking about that problem, so she answered casually. If I can't avoid it, I have a secret technique that can help me escape. What about you? I also have a few methods, but in the current situation, I might not be able to do it. Nya Wuxiang wasn't very confident when it came to this matter. Although she thought her strength wasn't bad, she was now facing a nascent soul cultivator. The gap between the nascent soul and the core formation realm really wasn't that easy to cross. Emotinga understood. She hesitated for a moment, then asked, "This secret technique of mine can also help you. However, I'll knock you out first. Can you accept it?" She absolutely wouldn't let a third person know about the secret of the virtual sky world, even if she had a good friendship with Nya Wuxiang. If she wanted to save Nya Wuxiang's life, she had to make sure Nya Wuxiang was unconscious. However, she didn't know whether Nya Wuxiang was willing to put her life in her hands. Nya Wuxiang only thought for a moment, then said, "If I really can't escape, it's up to you." After a pause, she shook her head and sighed. "In any case, it's not the first time I've put my life in your hands." Emotinga didn't quite understand what she meant. Just as she was about to ask, her divine sense, which had always been on guard, suddenly sensed a strange aura. A chill ran down her back. She opened her eyes and said, "There's something. It seems to be the monster the three fellow Taoists talked about." When the others heard what she said, they all stood up and took action with their magic weapons. Jinshi looked at her in surprise. He probably didn't expect her divine sense to be a bit stronger than his. After all, on the surface, Emotinga's cultivation level was just in the middle stage of the core formation realm, even weaker than his. Soon, the others also sensed the monster's approach. Its speed was indeed not fast, but if they weren't careful, it would be out of the range of their divine senses. This thing was indeed strange. Before long, the monster finally appeared at the end of the passage. Just as Jinshi and his two companions said, this monster didn't seem to have a strong momentum. It was just a strange black aura that seemed easy to scatter. However, they already learned about the danger of this thing from Jinshi and his two companions, so none of them dared to take it lightly. Among the 7 people, Yong Ruyu was the first to act. He and Xiao Chengrua used their jade bracelets. A ray of light shone and shot towards the monster. Just now, the two of them didn't have strong wills. They knew their status in this team wasn't as high as before, so they simply took the initiative to test the monster. Their actions were exactly what the others were thinking. Jinshi and his two companions had already fought with this monster. Now that they saw it, they knew it was already weak, so they could only hope the 4 of them had other methods. As for Emotinga, she also hoped someone could test it and think of a way to deal with it. Yong Ruyu and Xiao Chenrua's jade bracelets were a set of rarely seen combined magic weapons. Compared to single magic weapons, this kind of magic weapon had more variations. Right now, the 2 of them used it to strangle the monster rather than to kill it. The light from the jade bracelets formed a circle, trapping the monster. It suddenly tightened, as if it wanted to strangle the monster's aura. Under the twisting of the light, the aura was easily divided into 2 halves. Yong Ruyu and Xiao Chengrua looked happy, but Mushi already shouted, "If you break this thing up, it'll immediately gather back together." The light from the jade bracelets dissipated. Sure enough, after the light disappeared, the aura that was strained slowly gathered back together, as if it had never been hit. Yong Ruyu and Xiao Chenrua's expressions changed. This was their most powerful magic weapon. Didn't that mean they couldn't deal with this monster? "Senior martial brother, what should we do?" Xiao Chengrua asked. How could Yong Ryu know what to do? Right now his mind was also in a mess. He cast his gaze towards Emo Tiange and Nie Wuxiang. Nie Wuxiang had been silent since the monster appeared. Emo Tiange didn't know what she was thinking, so she hurriedly took out the Heaven and Earth fan. She unfolded the Heaven and Earth fan. With a crane cry, the red-crowned crane soared into the sky and directly attacked the monster with lightning speed. It pierced through the monster's body and created a hole. But in the next moment, the red-crowned crane disappeared in the air. The monster's aura still slowly condensed and became one. Emo Tiange's expression darkened. Spiritual aura. This was also a test move. This red-crowned crane was only a small spiritual aura transformed from the Heaven and Earth fan. But just now, not only did it not cause any substantial damage to the monster, but the spiritual aura condensed into the crane also disappeared. Jin Shi and the others were right. This monster could absorb both devil aura and spiritual aura. This was bad. The current situation was similar to the feeling they had when they faced the giant ape in Carefree Valley. But it was more terrifying than the ape. Although the giant ape was invulnerable, it was still limited by its cultivation level. If it was a nascent soul cultivator, they could kill it in one fell swoop. If they fought it head-on, it wasn't impossible. However, they couldn't figure out how strong this monster was. Running away wasn't the solution. If they couldn't recover their spiritual aura here, their spiritual aura, or devil aura, would be consumed. In the end, they wouldn't be able to resist this monster. With their current cultivation levels, if they wanted to get out of this predicament, they could only take drastic measures and leave this place. No one attacked again. That monster slowly moved closer to them. Jin Shi and the others turned pale. They said, "Fellow Taoists, do you have any other solutions?" No one spoke. The monster's aura slowly dispersed, spreading towards everyone. "Let's go," Nie Wuxiang shouted. "We're not its match now. We have to preserve our strength first." No one hesitated, including Emo Tiange. In the blink of an eye, they left their original spots and fled into the distance. Chapter 409. Where food? An hour later, everyone stopped at a passageway that didn't look any different from the previous one. Nie Wuxiang opened her mouth and said this. In an instant, everyone's eyes were focused on her. Nie Wuxiang continued. "If you want to live, you have to kill the thing that ate us or leave this place." Jin Shi and the other two people's breaths were obviously unstable. Yu Gui, who was the most timid among them, looked at Jin Shi in panic. Big brother this. They'd been running for a while, so they had much less devil aura than Emo Tiange's group. In the end, they'd be the first to give up. Jin Shi stared at Nie Wuxiang and asked, "This, fellow Taoist Tiancan, are you saying that Mei Feng tricked us into coming here just to feed this monster?" Nie Wuxiang shook her head softly. "The truth is right in front of us, but we don't know whether it's the ultimate goal or not. If we're eaten, what ultimate goal is there?" Yong Ryu frowned with an unsightly expression. "Will this monster become stronger after eating us?" Nie Wuxiang snorted and looked at him. "Didn't you notice that after you attacked, the monster's aura became stronger?" Yong Ryu was stunned. He really didn't notice that. He only felt annoyed when his attack failed. But after thinking about it carefully, even if the monster's aura became stronger, it shouldn't be much stronger, right? Otherwise, with core formation cultivator sensitivity to auras, they would have noticed it even if they didn't pay attention. Jin Yu and the other two people looked pensive. Mushi said hesitantly, "Indeed, when we first encountered this monster, it wasn't as strong as it is now." Yu Gui's expression changed greatly. He looked at Jin Shi and said, "Then, even if all of us joined forces, we still couldn't defeat it. What are you panicking for?" Jin Shi shouted at him. He then turned to Nie Wuxiang and asked politely, "Fellow Taoist, since you've noticed this, do you have a way to deal with it?" Nie Wuxiang shook her head. "I have a clue, but I can't think of a way yet." Jin Shi was dumbfounded. "Then what should we do next? Do we have to keep running like this? In that case, we won't be able to recover our devil aura, and will be eaten in the end. I have a suggestion." Emo Tiange, who had been silent the whole time, suddenly spoke, instantly attracting everyone's attention. Although they hadn't known each other for long, They had a general understanding of each other's personalities. Yong Ryu and Qiu Chunghua were capable of fighting, and their experience was also not bad. However, at the crucial moment, they were easily confused. As for Jin Shi and the other two, there was no need to mention Yu Gui. Although Mu Shi was meticulous, his horizons were limited, and Jin Shi's conduct was somewhat crude. Because of that, only Nie Wuxiang and Mo Tiange could put forward feasible suggestions at the critical moment. Mo Tiange continued to say, if the first test was to confuse us, and this test was City Lord Mei's real purpose, then everyone should have reached this place. Not bad. Although Jin Shi was crude, he was not stupid. Hearing these words, he immediately thought of what she wanted to say. If we gather everyone, maybe we can. Mo Tiange nodded in agreement. And, if we work together, we might not necessarily have no hope. Mu Shi immediately began to calculate carefully. We have 7 people here, so there should be 8 people who are not in the same place. One of them has already been swallowed. This is something we saw with our own eyes. If the others are all fine, then there should be 7 people left. Yong Ryu looked a bit hesitant. Do we really have to gather everyone? But this place is like a maze. How are we going to find them? There were so many forks in the road that it would take a long time to walk through them. About that, Nie Wuxiang said, we'll divide into groups and make marks along the way. Every time we separate for half an hour, we must meet again to ensure that we won't get separated. That's fine, Jin Shi said. But even if we do that, we might not be able to gather everyone. Besides, if we can't restore our devil aura. Therefore, we must determine a time, Mo Tiange said. First, let's talk about how long the medicinal pills you have can keep full of spiritual aura. This, Jin Shi was the first to hesitate. For cultivators, the number of medicinal pills they had was the same as the number of magic weapons. They were all top secrets. If this kind of thing was known by others, they would fall into a passive position during fights of magical powers. Even if they were good friends, they wouldn't ask this kind of question. On the contrary, Yong Ryu immediately said, yes, we're all in the same boat now. In front of a strong enemy, we'd naturally have a higher chance of survival if we join hands. So we must trust each other for once. However, I hope we can all take an oath that we won't turn against each other before we can safely escape. No problem. Mo Tiange glanced at Jin Shi and asked, fellow Taoists, what do you think? This, Jin Shi was still hesitant. Seeing this, Yong Ryu said with a heavy voice, fellow Taoists, you're devil cultivators. Relatively speaking, the binding force of an oath on you isn't as strong as ours. If you can't even accept this, how can we trust each other? Without trust, how can we cooperate? Big brother, he's right. Mu Shi reminded him in a low voice. The situation is urgent, so we can only do this. After hesitating for a long time, Jin Shi clenched his teeth and said, all right, we have to gamble. He then raised his hand and said, I, Jin Shi, hereby take an oath to the devil god that I'll advance and retreat together with all the fellow Taoists here, and trust each other. I'll treat you the same way you treat me. If I harbor evil thoughts and violate my oath, I'll never be able to advance to the nascent soul realm for the rest of my life, and all my divine abilities will be crippled. After he finished chanting, Mu Shi and Yu Gui did the same. After making the oath, the 3 of them stared at Mo Tiange and the others. Mo Tiange didn't hesitate. She said first, I swear by my inner demon that before I can safely escape, as long as fellow Taoists don't violate the oath, I'll trust you wholeheartedly, and will never turn against you. If I violate this oath, Tao Ancestor will bear witness, and let me be trapped by my inner demon for the rest of my life. My cultivation level won't be able to advance even an inch, and my divine abilities will be crippled. Then Nie Wuxiang, Yong Ryu, and Qiu Chunghua made the oath one by one. When the last person finished speaking, the 7 of them heaved sighs of relief. They finally had a preliminary trust among each other. Mortals might be able to deny oaths, but cultivators like them couldn't. The reason they embarked on the path of cultivation was because they believed there were immortals and devils in this world. That being the case, how could they violate their oaths? Even though devil cultivators didn't cultivate their minds as strictly as Dao cultivators, they still had their own taboos. After making the oath, Jin Shi was straightforward. He took out several bottles of medicinal pills from his robe and said, "For us devil cultivators, there aren't many medicinal pills we can take directly. After entering this secret place, we've consumed a lot of devil cores. These bottles are the only medicinal pills I have left. I think they can probably last us for a day or two." Mushi said, "I have less than Big Brother. But if I use them sparingly, it won't be a problem for me to last a day." Yu Gui opened his Qianquan bag and looked inside. "I'm about the same as Mushi. I can probably only last us for a day." Seeing this situation, Mo Tiange wrinkled her brows. She knew devil cultivators usually didn't have many medicinal pills, but she didn't expect they would have so few. They had been walking for a long time, but they still hadn't found the end of this cave. If they wanted to search the whole cave, it definitely wouldn't be a matter of a day. In addition, in order to deal with that monster, they had to save some medicinal pills for the last moment, and couldn't use them all. Next was Qiu Qingrua. "Our situation is a bit better. I often concoct medicinal pills, so I have a lot of medicinal pills that can be used as restorative panaceas. I think it won't be a problem for me and Senior Marshal Brother to take them for 3 to 5 days. Upon hearing this, Mo Tiange's expression became a bit better. Core formation cultivators, especially core formation cultivators who belong to a sect, could only get by if they had so many medicinal pills. Nie Wuxiang spread her hands and said, "I don't have many medicinal pills, but I have a treasure that can replenish my spiritual aura and can last us for 3 to 5 days. Finally, Mo Tiange said, "I have a lot of medicinal pills on me, so 3 to 5 days won't be a problem." She didn't finish her sentence and continued, "That being the case, let's make an agreement on the other matters." The others didn't have any objections. They agreed on a marking and a rough route, and in the end, they split into 3 groups. The 3 devil cultivators naturally stayed together. Yong Ruyu and Qiu Qingrua went one way, while Mo Tiange and Nie Wuxiang went the other. Although everyone had sworn an oath, when it came to splitting up, they still needed to trust each other and have a tacit understanding. "Fellow Taoists, Junior Marshal Sister and I will go first." Once the details were settled, Yong Ryu cupped her hands to bid farewell. The 2 of them chose the left path. If they encountered too many forks in the road, they would come back early and notify the others through voice transmission. Jin Shi said, "Then we'll also go." Once he finished speaking, he didn't waste any time and led his 2 brothers to the right path. Finally, there were only the 2 of them left. Mo Tiange and Nie Wuxiang glanced at each other then sighed and walked towards the middle passage. After walking for a while, when their divine senses couldn't detect the traces of the other 2 people, Nie Wuxiang suddenly asked, "Your idea isn't just to gather everyone together, right?" Mo Tiange glanced at her then shook her head with a bitter smile. "Sure enough, I still can't hide it from you. You're right, this proposal actually has another meaning. If we can gather everyone together, of course it'll be good. But if this road is blocked and everyone gets separated, it'll actually buy time for everyone. If they split up, that monster could only chase one target at a time, so the others would be relatively safer. If they cooperated well, they'd consume less spiritual aura, which would allow them to hold on for a while longer. This method might not necessarily guarantee everyone's safety, but even if someone was sacrificed, it could buy time for the others." They agreed so straightforwardly, so it's not like they didn't know what you meant. "I know." Mo Tiange didn't try to hide it. "But they're all strangers. How could they refuse to sacrifice some people in exchange for their own safety? In any case, I was the one who made this proposal, so they just need to acquiesce. But if they're the ones sacrificing themselves, then they can only blame their bad luck. It's the same for us," Mo Tiange said flatly. Now she wouldn't be affected by this kind of thing. On the path of cultivation, sometimes luck was the key. If you were lucky, you could advance step by step. But if you were unlucky, you could only become someone else's stepping stone. Nie Wuxiang was silent. She was even more accustomed to this kind of thing than Mo Tiange. After a while, she once again asked, "But this isn't your ultimate goal, right?" Emo Tienga turned her head and smiled at her. "I have to ask you about that. Actually, you know that monster, right?" Chapter 410. Nia Wuxiang was stunned for a long time before she finally said, "How did you know?" She didn't mean to deny it. Emo Tienga smiled. "Although we haven't known each other for long, our understanding is more than superficial. According to your personality, when you saw that monster, even if you didn't try, you wouldn't have reacted like that, right?" Nia Wuxiang was a person who liked to act rather than analyze. Besides, she had so many treasures in her hands, so she definitely had all kinds of attack methods. But when they met that monster, she didn't try at all, and just told everyone to run, which wasn't in line with her personality. Seeing that Nia Wuxiang didn't speak, Emo Tienga asked again with a smile, "What? You can't tell me about that thing?" Nia Wuxiang glanced at her then said slowly, "I've seen that thing before." As they walked, she said, "The cultivation technique my master practiced is called Primordial Devil Great Technique. I followed him for more than 100 years, and vaguely heard him mention that when he was just a small foundation-building cultivator, he once took a risk and entered Demonic Mountain and accidentally obtained a fated chance. He found an ancient map on Demonic Mountain. Following the map, he arrived at a secret place. In the end, he obtained a cultivation technique engraved on a stone tablet in that secret place. This cultivation technique was very strange. It was very different from the cultivation techniques of today, whether it was the devil path or the righteous path. My master comprehended it for more than 100 years, and finally comprehended the primordial devil great technique. From then on, he became one of the top cultivators in the celestial pole. The cultivation technique on the stone tablet. Emo Tienga muttered to herself, "Before I was born, master hadn't come out for many years. We lived in seclusion in the far west desert, and rarely set foot in Kunwu. Even if there was something, master would only send me to handle it. Ever since I was a child, I saw master always cultivating in closed-door meditation, and never went out. With master's personality, living in seclusion for hundreds of years, and not going out to stir up trouble, was naturally a very important matter. During that time, master was practicing the primordial devil great technique. In master's cave, there was a primordial devil pool, where he gathered the primordial devil aura he cultivated with various methods. This aura was similar to devil aura, but it was much stronger. Moreover, it invaded people's hearts like death aura. When I was a child, master cultivated a monster from the primordial devil pool, which is the thing we saw today. Although the westernmost area is desolate, there are still many scattered tribes and mountain villages. Every once in a while master would." Speaking up to this point, Nia Wuxiang's voice was somewhat trembling. He would order that monster to exterminate a village. No matter if it was a man or a woman, old or young, they would all be swallowed by that monster, and not even their bones would remain. Emo Tienga felt goosebumps all over her body. Not attacking mortals was basically a rule that all cultivators abided by. Even devil cultivators rarely did things like exterminating an entire village for no reason. This Master Song Feng really cultivated the deceitful path. He didn't care about karma at all. Nia Wuxiang took a deep breath, and her tone became calm again. Every once in a while, this monster will go out to plunder and kill. When it comes back, it'll become even stronger. I once heard my master muttering to himself that it was a pity that there were few cultivators in the far west. If he could eat cultivators, he would grow even faster. At that time, it would only be a matter of time before he mastered his demonic arts. I remember master refined this monster before we left the far west desert. I was about 60 years old at that time. Nia Wuxiang thought for a while then said, I remember master refined this monster before we left the westernmost area. At that time, I was about 60 years old. Nia Wuxiang thought for a while and said, I remember master refined this monster before we left the far west desert. At that time, I was about 60 years old. Emo Tienga calculated in her mind and asked in confusion. With your master's personality, Why didn't he go to Kunwu to kill and plunder? In any case, his cultivation level was amazing. Robbing a few cultivators wasn't a problem. Nie Wuxiang shook her head. You don't know the reason. Back then, my master lived in seclusion in the far west desert, because something went wrong during his cultivation. He offended a lot of people in the celestial pole, so he didn't dare to step into Kunwu. He could only use this method to restore his spiritual aura. I see. Emotienga lowered her head and thought. If this thing is the same as the one your master cultivated, then City Lord May's cultivation technique is similar to your master's. Your master spent several hundred years devouring mortals to succeed, but City Lord May devoured more than 10 core formation cultivators in one go. Is it possible that he'll finish his cultivation technique soon? Nie Wuxiang looked dignified. After a long time she said, maybe. Mortals, even if there were tens of thousands of them, were nothing compared to cultivators, let alone core formation cultivators. Every one of them had powerful spiritual aura or devil aura, so the possibility of this happening was too high. Emotienga thought for a while then said, then we can roughly figure out what happened. City Lord May obtained a cultivation technique similar to your master's from somewhere. Since he was trapped in the early stage of the nascent soul realm for several hundred years, he couldn't wait to finish cultivating this cultivation technique. Therefore, he deceived the core formation cultivators who passed by Starfall City, and made up some reasons to lure us into his trap. He wanted to feed us to this monster, so that he could finish cultivating the devil technique in one night, and advance to a top-notch cultivator. As for the devil crystals, it might have the same purpose as this place where spiritual aura couldn't be restored. Because that monster was still too weak, it needed these methods to consume the strength of core formation cultivators like them, so that they could be swallowed into its stomach as soon as possible. Correct. Nie Wuxiang muttered. She was too familiar with this thing. So familiar that it reminded her of her past nightmares. Primordial devil aura. She hadn't forced it out of her body yet. But did she have to face this thing again? The two of them were silent. Emotienga pondered a lot more. There were some things she knew more than Nie Wuxiang. Coupled with what Nie Wuxiang told her, she had an even bigger conjecture in her heart. Nie Wuxiang said Master Songfeng's devil technique came from a cultivation technique on a stone tablet. The primordial devil aura he cultivated was much stronger than ordinary devil aura, and was somewhat similar to dead aura. Wasn't this situation similar to Ren Yufeng's incident? Ren Yufeng was also a foundation-building cultivator. He obtained a stone tablet from the divine dragon sacrificial temple, and comprehended a cultivation technique from it. He cultivated dead aura, and became a core formation cultivator in one fell swoop. As for Master Songfeng, he was only a small cultivator back then. Because of a fated chance, he obtained a cultivation technique on a stone tablet from a secret place. After comprehending it for 100 years, he comprehended the primordial devil technique, and became the first late nascent soul cultivator who shook the celestial pole today. If there was a difference, it would be that Ren Yufeng cultivated dead aura, while Master Songfeng cultivated primordial devil aura, which was of a higher level. This point wasn't hard to explain. First, Master Songfeng spent a lot more time comprehending than Ren Yufeng, so his comprehension was clearer and more thorough than Ren Yufeng's. Second, based on Master Songfeng's behavior, although he was extremely evil, his comprehension and cultivation wasn't low, so his comprehension was closer to the essence than Ren Yufeng's. As for this City Lord May, since she racked her brains to set up this trap, and was still so impatient, it could be speculated that she hadn't obtained this cultivation technique for a long time. With her nascent soul cultivation level, she naturally could easily comprehend the real secret technique. That being the case, there were 3 similar cultivation techniques, and 2 of them came from a stone tablet. Moreover, Feifei once said there was a black tortoise sacrificial temple in Worryless Valley, and this place was precisely the mountain range where Worryless Valley was located. Among these 3 examples, Ren Yufeng's incident was the clearest. He obtained a stone tablet from the divine dragon sacrificial temple and cultivated dead aura. In Master Songfeng's incident, What could be confirmed was the stone tablet. As for the sacrificial temple, presumably, Nie Wuxiang also didn't know. City Lord Mei could deduce that it was the Black Tortoise sacrificial temple, but whether she obtained the stone tablet or not was unknown. However, it could be inferred that the other two people obtained the secret technique from the stone tablet. So City Lord Mei should have done the same. Moreover, both City Lord Mei and Ren Yufeng went to the sacrificial temple and obtained the stone tablet from there. Therefore, even if the secret place Master Song Feng went to wasn't the sacrificial temple, the stone tablet should have come from one of the sacrificial temples in the beginning. 3 sacrificial temples of the distant past era, 3 stone tablets, and a cultivation technique that seemed devilish yet wasn't. This matter wasn't simple. After thinking for a long time, Emo Tinga finally heaved a sigh and asked, "Actually, you have a way to solve it, don't you?" After a while, Nie Wuxiang finally exhaled softly and revealed a faint smile. Her gaze was complicated as she said, "Yes. But this method, will it have a great impact on you?" Nie Wuxiang let out a bitter laugh. She calmly looked into Emo Tinga's eyes and said 4 words. "Overturn the world." The two of them were silent for a while before Nie Wuxiang continued to speak slowly. "Although I stole that Tianyin sect's treasure and can temporarily suppress the primordial devil aura in my body, it's already deeply rooted in my meridians. It can't be erased without a special method. That being the case, why would I be afraid of this thing? The primordial devil aura in my body is of a higher grade than this monster's aura." Emo Tinga knew there were differences in grade between spirit and devil aura. However, she didn't know how to analyze Nie Wuxiang's situation. Attack with primordial devil aura? Since they were from the same source, it didn't seem easy, right? Otherwise, what other methods could she use? A light bulb suddenly went off in her head, and her eyes widened. Could it be that your method is to absorb this thing? Nie Wuxiang gave her a deep look then nodded silently. Emo Tinga's mood surged when she saw Nie Wuxiang's affirmation. She said somewhat anxiously, "Then won't you fall short of success?" Before this, Nie Wuxiang just told her that she wanted to be a real cultivator. But if that was the case, "It's no big deal," Nie Wuxiang said faintly. "Of course I don't want to do that, but if I really have no other choice, so what if I become a real devil cultivator? Whether I'm an immortal or a devil, it's just a thought. I don't want to ascend, so it's fine as long as I know it myself." Emo Tinga was silent for a long time before she sighed. "With your mental state, I don't need to say anything more." Many cultivators didn't attach importance to mental cultivation, but only when they made a realm breakthrough did they realize how important this hurdle was. Nie Wuxiang being able to say this showed that she was very clear about her future. "Fellow Taoist Emo," Nie Wuxiang suddenly turned around and called out, "Anne, I want to ask you one thing." Nie Wuxiang stared at her and said earnestly, "If I really do that, please take me out of this place safely." Emo Tinga was shocked. She stared at her deeply and said, "Do you believe I can take you out of this place safely?" Nie Wuxiang showed a faint smile and said, "Just like what you said before, knock me out and use your secret technique. I've said it before. In any case, this isn't the first time I've put my life in your hands. As for whether we can escape or not, that can only depend on our luck." Emo Tinga felt that her weakness had been exposed. She wasn't afraid of becoming enemies with others, and she was also used to speculating that others had evil intentions. However, Nie Wuxiang's clear trust in her made her unable to say anything. She smiled bitterly. "This Nie Wuxiang, she's basically eating into my personality, right?" Chapter 411. There's someone. Emo Tinga suddenly stopped. Nie Wuxiang knew her divine sense was powerful, so she didn't doubt her and immediately asked, "How many? What's the situation?" Emo Tinga carefully sensed for a while then said, "One seems to be wandering aimlessly." Nie Wuxiang was stunned. Before she could say anything, Emo Tinga turned around and said, "Let's go. We'll look for him directly." The two of them weren't slow. After a while, Nie Wuxiang's divine sense also sensed that person. Then that person also approached them. Both of them were core formation cultivators, so they moved very fast. Before long, Mo Tiange saw a person coming out of a fork in the road not far away. That person's face was gray and extremely thin. His body was covered in a green robe that was almost black. He looked like a dried corpse. However, although he looked extremely ugly, his momentum was very strong. He was in the peak of the middle stage of the core formation realm. Fellow Taoist, Mo Tiange said, "May I ask?" Whoosh! Before she could finish, that person suddenly pushed his palm. Along with the wind from his palm, a cloud of black smoke appeared out of thin air and rushed towards their faces. Devil aura! Mo Tiange fumbled in her chinquan bag. The white silk handkerchief turned into a mist and blocked the devil aura. At the same time, Nie Wuxiang jumped up and punched the devil cultivator. With a loud bang, the devil aura and the strong aura collided, cracking a large piece of the stone wall around them. Nie Wuxiang was shaken and took a step back with a surprised expression on her face. Although she was a woman, she was a martial cultivator. She walked the path of unyielding and unyielding. Her punch was extremely domineering, but this devil cultivator was able to force her back with just his devil chi. He was suppressing her with his cultivation base alone. Something's wrong. Mo Tiange stared at the cultivator in front of her. Look at his eyes. Nie Wuxiang stared at him and frowned. This cultivator's eyes were lifeless and unfocused, as if he was in a trance. Mo Tiange swept her gaze and saw the puppet hanging on his waist. It was covered with a layer of black aura and emitted a faint light. The aura of the devil crystal couldn't be blocked. A thought flashed in her mind, and her face turned pale. Could it be? Could it be what? Just as Nie Wuxiang asked, the devil cultivator clasped his hands together. A strange light flashed in his eyes, and another devil aura attacked them. Facing this attack, both of them chose to dodge. The two of them suddenly separated. With a flash of teleportation, they were already dozens of feet away. Look at the puppet, Mo Tiange answered after taking some time to spare. Nie Wuxiang's eyes flashed, and she was terrified. At this moment, the demonic cultivator arrived once more. His speed was extremely fast and wasn't much slower than Nie Wuxiang's. Furthermore, he only used his devil aura to attack, and didn't even use his magic weapon. But his power was extremely great. Seeing the devil aura gathering in his hand, Mo Tiange unfolded the heaven and earth fan in her hand. In an instant, mountains and rivers loomed in front of her. Fellow Taoist, Mo Tiange shouted again. The devil cultivator didn't react at all. He turned a deaf ear to it, and blasted out another ball of devil chi, immediately destroying the seemingly solid mountain and river in front of him. Mo Tiange wasn't surprised. Even Nie Wuxiang was repelled. Her heaven and earth fan wasn't good at blocking, so it was normal for it to be broken. Therefore, she instantly put away the heaven and earth fan, and summoned the white silk handkerchief again, easily blocking the remaining devil aura that passed through the heaven and earth fan. It seems he can't hear us, Nie Wuxiang said. Yes, it seems our guess about the use of devil crystals was wrong. Nie Wuxiang reacted quickly and said, You mean, this devil crystal could absorb essence energy by itself, and a person would become stupid if they lost too much of their essence energy. So, it wouldn't be impossible for City Lord Mei to turn them into a living dead person if she had used some strange secret technique on it. We can't show mercy. We must kill him. After saying that, Mo Tiange fumbled in her chinquan bag and took out an item. The Lotus Scarlet Umbrella. With this umbrella, poisonous devil aura couldn't invade it, so it was a good thing to deal with devil cultivators. Nie Wuxiang wasn't slow either. She also took out an item then rushed forward. The two of them weren't weak in fights of magical power. Even if they fought this devil cultivator alone, their chances of winning were quite high, let alone 2 against 1. Mo Tiange opened the Lotus Scarlet Umbrella. In an instant, the pink lotus on the umbrella bloomed as if it was alive. In an instant, the devil aura around her body was cleansed, and the tip of the umbrella drew a bolt of lightning, striking towards the devil cultivator. Lightning techniques had a restraining effect on devil cultivators. Under this strike, the devil cultivator's eyes became dull for a moment, and his whole body stood still. At the same time, Nie Wuxiang approached him like a gust of wind, and punched him with a tyrannical force. Pooh! The devil cultivator coughed up a mouthful of blood, but he was still sent flying without any sound or even a scream. He was so thin that only his bones remained. At this moment, he looked like a piece of wood wrapped in clothes. He fell headfirst and no longer moved. Dead. Emo Tienga was dumbfounded when she sensed the devil aura on the devil cultivator's body, gradually dissipating. Nie Wuxiang stepped forward to take a look, then nodded. Dead. Emo Tienga was dumbfounded for a while, then said in surprise, "What's going on?" He was so strong just now. I think it has something to do with him becoming like this, right? Nie Wuxiang said. I remember this devil cultivator. At that time, I saw him in the hall. He was only in the early stage of the core formation realm. Emo Tienga thought for a moment, then nodded understandingly. I see. In that case, City Lord Mei must have put a lot of effort into the puppet. There must have been some kind of restriction or secret technique on it that turned people into this. Their realms were high, but their strength was low, so it was convenient to feed that monster. Fortunately, they didn't use that puppet in the beginning. Otherwise, even if they didn't turn into the living dead, they would have been really unlucky if they became dumb. The two of them sighed. They cleaned up the scene, then continued to look for other people. They'd already killed one of the 7 people they were looking for. So what about the others? Were they still in good condition? Or had they already followed in this cultivator's footsteps and become a puppet? An hour passed, but they didn't find any other people. They decided to meet up with the other 2 groups of people and tell them about a new location. After they met up, Emo Tienga told them what they encountered and told them to be vigilant. Soon after, they once again split up to look for other people. The other 2 groups didn't encounter anything during this hour, so they were still looking for 6 people. As time passed bit by bit, Jean Sher's group of 3 started to feel anxious. They had the least medicinal pills. If they didn't find anything in the end, they would be the first to be sacrificed. Half a day later, Yong Ryu sent them a voice transmission. They encountered 2 devil cultivators who had already turned into puppets. These 2 devil cultivators were the same as the ones Emo Tienga and her group encountered. They attacked without saying a word. Before long, Jean Sher's group of 3 encountered another one. A chaotic massacre took place in this cave. ******, City Lord. Outside the secret area, next to the transporting formation, Elder Liang looked at the darkening sky and called out in a low voice. City Lord Mei, who was sitting cross-legged on a small slope, didn't even open her eyes. She just snorted and said, "What's wrong?" Elder Liang asked with a worried expression. It's been almost a day, but it's still not over. Did something unexpected happen? After a while, City Lord Mei said slowly, "Something unexpected. There should be a little, but the result will be the same." Elder Liang didn't understand. Why? From what I can see, among those core formation cultivators, there are a few who don't seem easy to deal with. They don't have devil crystals on them, and they're very strong. If we kill them all, wouldn't it be a waste of City Lord's efforts? They used a special method to transform this place into a small distant past secret area, refined those devil crystals, and deceived so many core formation cultivators. Each of these tasks was very troublesome. Moreover, they had to do them one after another without any room for mistakes. The City Lord planned this meticulously because he wanted to succeed in one fell swoop. They couldn't capture people randomly, because core formation cultivators were the backbone of a large cultivation group. If they lost 1 or 2 important cultivators, their nascent soul cultivators would show up, which would bring trouble to Descending Star City. Moreover, they didn't know how long they would have to wait to capture insignificant cultivators to feed. Hence, they chose to deceive and gather all the core formation cultivators together. After making all the necessary preparations, they would feed all of them to the City Lord's Yuan Devil. When the City Lord became a top-notch cultivator, it would be too late for the large cultivation groups to find out. This plan was very detailed and meticulous. However, because it was too detailed and meticulous, if anything went wrong, it would be a disaster for the City Lord and Descending Star City. If the Yuan devil didn't grow to a sufficient level, and the news got out, both the righteous and demonic sects would start a massacre on descending Star City. Elder Liang couldn't help but worry about this. All of them were the city lord's trusted aides. If they failed, the city lord might be able to escape, but they would definitely become pawns. Just as Elder Liang's heart was in turmoil, City Lord Mei's sharp voice rang out. "Are you afraid?" Elder Liang shrank back and said softly, "I'm a little worried." "Humph." City Lord Mei snorted unhappily. "What's there to worry about? This matter is already within my grasp. Among these people, there are 4 who didn't wear any demonic crystals. They are very strong and astute. They will definitely notice something amiss after entering the disorienting cave. However, so what? I've already made preparations in the disorienting cave. They definitely won't be able to escape. Even if they kill the others, it's useless because the spiritual demonic aura won't dissipate in the disorienting cave. In the end, it will be absorbed by my Yuan devil." "I see." Elder Liang heaved a sigh of relief. The disorienting cave was personally set up by the city lord. He didn't know what was inside. As for those 4 people, when my Yuan devil grows to a certain level and their spiritual aura is exhausted, they won't be able to escape death. "So you've already planned this?" "I've been meddlesome." Elder Liang was finally at ease. No matter what, these people were still core formation cultivators. They wouldn't be able to defeat the city lord. City Lord Mei smiled proudly and didn't say anything else. However, it had indeed been a long time. He really wanted to know what had happened inside. After thinking for a moment, he raised his hand and took out a palm-sized ancient mirror. He gathered demonic aura in his hand and lightly pushed it against the mirror. Immediately, the scene inside the cave appeared on the mirror's surface. After watching for a while, City Lord Mei couldn't help but exclaim, "These core formation cultivators are stronger than I imagined." Chapter 412. Ling Xiaorui was thrown out, and the spiritual aura exploded. Mo Tiange wiped her face, looked at the fallen devil cultivator, and breathed a sigh of relief. These unconscious devil cultivators were both easy to deal with and hard to deal with. The easy part was that as long as they were restrained for a moment, she and Nie Wuxiang could react fast enough to cripple them. The hard part was that if they couldn't be restrained, their strength would soar, and their devil aura would be very powerful. They could only choose to dodge and fall into a passive position. "The 5th one," Nie Wuxiang said as she tightened her gloves. Jin Shi and the others witnessed one of them being swallowed by that monster. Up until now, their 3 groups had killed 5 devil cultivators, which added up to 6. So, if the others hadn't been eaten, there would be 2 more people left. Without exception, all 5 of them had lost their minds, and the remaining 2 were probably also in danger. Thinking of this, Mo Tiange couldn't help but sigh. Of the 15 people, 6 were dead, and 2 were missing. Among the 7 of them, Jin Shi and the other 2 didn't have medicinal pills to support them, so they wouldn't be able to hold on for long. It was hard to say whether Yong Ruyu or Qiu Chunruo would survive, because their cultivation levels were a bit weak. The situation wasn't optimistic. "Let's go," Mo Tiange said after she finished packing up and shook off the messy thoughts in her mind. Nie Wuxiang followed her. When they reached a fork in the road, Mo Tiange looked up and was stunned. Nie Wuxiang, who was behind her, almost bumped into her. She asked in confusion, "What's wrong?" Before she could finish, she was also stunned. From the fork on their left, a man in a blue robe with a sword on his back came out. He was the only Taoist cultivator other than Yong Ruyu and Qiu Chunruo, the blue-robed swordsman. And the reason why they were surprised was that when this person appeared, he didn't have any aura at all. It was to the extent that they only noticed his appearance the moment they saw him. It wasn't because their divine senses had already detected him. This person had restrained his aura. Could it be that he discovered something? This person walked forward for a while and stopped in front of them. He looked at them sharply and cupped his hands. "Fellow Taoists, He didn't become a puppet," Nie Wuxiang said in a low voice, her voice full of joy. They had been searching for a long time. and together with the other two groups of people, they had encountered a total of 5 cultivators. All of them had been turned into puppets and could only be killed. Now that a normal person had suddenly appeared, it was truly a joyous thing. Emotienga also did the same. Her gaze swept over the cultivator, but sure enough, she didn't see any wooden puppets on him. She raised her hand and returned the greeting with a smile on her face. Fellow Taoist, I'm Qin Wei, and this is my friend, Tianqin. May I know how to address you? Qin Wei Tianqin? A trace of doubt flashed across the green-robed swordsman's eyes, but he quickly replied, I am Jinshin. So it's Taoist Jinshin. Nice to meet you. She didn't give him any time to respond and immediately continued. May I ask, fellow Taoist Jinshin, if you've noticed anything unusual after entering this secret place? When the self-proclaimed sword heart cultivator heard this, he vigilantly looked at them and said, Fellow Taoist, what do you mean? What I mean is, don't you think this secret place is abnormal, and doesn't seem like an ancient secret place at all? Nia Wuxiang impatiently probed further, so she asked straightforwardly. Jinshin stared at them for a long time before he finally said, Correct. So it seems fellow Taoists want to cooperate with me? It was easy to talk to smart people. Emotienga nodded with a smile. Exactly. Since fellow Taoist also noticed something unusual about this place, you should know what kind of danger we're facing. This isn't like a trial where we can act alone. It's very difficult to find a way out if we're alone. This Jinshin, who once refused Yong Ruyu and Nia Wuxiang's proposal, seemed to be someone who liked to act alone. But from another point of view, such a person must be skillful, bold, and extremely opinionated. Jinshin didn't answer immediately. His gaze fell on them as if he was thinking. Emotienga and Nia Wuxiang also didn't say much. When opinionated people were thinking about a problem, they generally didn't like others persuading them from the side. If they were too nosy, it would be counterproductive. Okay. Emotienga was stunned and blinked her eyes. Fellow Taoist Jinshin, you don't want to think about it for a while? Jinshin shook his head softly and looked at the two of them. It's imperative to cooperate, so why do I need to think about it? Fellow Taoists, tell me, where did you find the abnormality? Emotienga was very happy that he was so straightforward. From what fellow Taoist said, you already know how serious this matter is? Jinshin's line of sight shifted. His gaze was like lightning as it paused on her. He said faintly, I encountered that strange aura. There was no need to explain. Since he encountered that monster, if he was smart, he could roughly guess what kind of situation he'd fallen into. Fellow Taoist, where's that puppet? Emotienga asked. Do you still have it with you? Jinshin said, I lost it a long time ago. This thing must be evil. Oh. Jinshin's calm tone surprised Emotienga and Nia Wuxiang. Although they had long guessed that this thing was strange, they weren't so sure before they discovered the secret of the puppet. Jinshin's gaze stopped on the two of them for a moment. Then he said in a calm tone, Fellow Taoists, you look quite young. Maybe you're still inexperienced. When you live past 200 years old and see more things, you'll understand that sometimes crisis is a kind of intuition. Under this kind of intuition, you don't need to be too sure to make a decision. When Emotienga and Nia Wuxiang heard this, they were both shocked. This Jinshin really couldn't be underestimated. At a glance, he could see that they weren't old. That was fine, but the later experience was more important. This person had definitely experienced many trials and tribulations. His mental state and strength had reached a certain level. Upon realizing this, Emotienga was happy and worried at the same time. She was happy because this person had such strength, and as a companion, their strength would increase a lot. She was worried because she hoped he could work together with them. So that's how it is. We really don't have enough experience. Jinshin nodded and didn't continue talking nonsense. He said straightforwardly, Okay, we don't have much time. Tell me what you've discovered. After we communicate with each other, maybe we can find a way to deal with it. Emotienga and Nia Wuxiang naturally didn't have any objections. The three of them briefly exchanged their findings. After they finished talking, the three of them became silent with solemn expressions. What Jianxin discovered was very simple. He'd entered many secret places, but as soon as he entered this cave, he found something was wrong. Then he couldn't find the exit no matter what, so he realized they'd fallen into a trap. But this simple discovery was very important. They couldn't find the exit. This Jianxin seemed to be much more experienced than them, but he also couldn't find the exit. Could it be that they could only become turtles in a jar and wait helplessly for death? Thinking up to this point, Mo Tiange clenched her teeth. If that was really the case, she'd take Nia Wuxiang and hide in the virtual sky world. At worst, they'd just wait for a few dozen years until the other party gave up on this place, and then slowly find a way out. But this was the last resort. Not to mention that she didn't want to rely on the virtual sky world. This couldn't completely solve the problem. In the end, this was City Lord May's territory. If they continued wasting time like this, if their state of mind was affected and they couldn't advance, then City Lord May would really advance to the nascent soul realm. Alright, let's talk about the current situation. After a moment of silence, Jianxin was the first to speak. There are still 5 people with you. Including me, there's a total of 8 people who are still alive. You said you've already killed 6 people. So in other words, there's still 1 person whose whereabouts haven't been found. Correct. Mo Tiange nodded. Does fellow Taoist Jianxin have any suggestions? Jianxin's tone was still flat, as if he was discussing an insignificant matter. I think the remaining person should still be alive. Oh. Mo Tiange was surprised. Why is fellow Taoist so sure? Because before we entered the secret place, I remember everyone's situation. Mo Tiange and Nia Wuxiang were startled. This Jianxin was actually so meticulous, Jianxin continued to say. Among the 15 of us, aside from you and me, there's still 1 person who didn't wear a puppet. That person was a devil cultivator in the middle stage of the core formation realm. He didn't seem to be anything special, but I noticed he had a pair of strange hands. What happened to his hands? Jianxin was still expressionless. His hands were wrapped in black cloth, so divine sense couldn't penetrate them. However, I noticed that when he raised his hands, they revealed a bit of silvery white luster. Jianxin glanced at the 2 of them and said, if I'm not mistaken, that was a pair of fake hands. Moreover, it was refined into a magic weapon. Mo Tiange was shocked. Nia Wuxiang already shouted. He refined his hands into a magic weapon? Yes, and it's a pair. Jianxin's tone was still flat. This kind of cultivation method is similar to that of the monster race. If I'm not mistaken, he should have been cultivating body refining techniques at the same time. In other words, his body should be much stronger than other cultivators. The reason why human cultivators are stronger than demonic beasts is because we know how to concoct medicinal pills, take medicines, and use magic weapons. Monster race, on the other hand, are born with tyrannical bodies that can split mountains and split rocks. If there's a human cultivator who also has the strength of the monster race, then he's certainly not mediocre. Mo Tiange pondered for a moment then said, then let's find him first. Since he's so powerful, if we cooperate, our strength will also be a lot stronger. Jianxin nodded. He said so much because this was what he wanted to express. Nia Wuxiang only said 1 sentence. I have no opinion. Since the 3 of them were in agreement, Mo Tiange sent a sound-transmitting talisman to the other 2 squads. After explaining the situation, she said that they couldn't go back and rendezvous within half an hour. She wanted to confirm the general direction and tell everyone to be careful. This direction. After they started on the road again, Jianxin once again expressed his opinion. Mo Tiange looked around. There were 4 or 5 forked roads in front of her. He chose the second road on the right and asked, why? Jianxin said faintly, when I came, I was sure that the 2 roads on the left were empty. If we take this road, we can use our divine sense to explore whether there's anyone on these 3 roads. The strength Jianxin displayed had already convinced Mo Tiange and Nia Wuxiang. Now that they thought about it, they listened to his suggestion and stepped onto the second road on the right. Chapter 413. Elder Liang trembled with fear as he looked at the frowning City Lord Mei. He did not dare to speak. As a City Lord Mei was a good person. He had appointed the elders to manage Descending Star City. He had never doubted them, and was not harsh to his subordinates. However, demonic cultivators who practiced demonic techniques were usually more hot-tempered than righteous cultivators. If something went wrong, he would not be polite to them. Even though this matter did not have much to do with the elders, there was a saying in this world: venting one's anger on others. City Lord Mei's face was full of anger. He clenched his fist, and a ball of demonic energy shot out, raising a small hill nearby to the ground. The power of a nascent soul cultivator's technique, even if it was done casually, was extremely shocking. This loud explosion shocked the core formation stage elders of Descending Star City. They looked at City Lord Mei with fear. Fortunately, City Lord Mei did not vent his anger on them this time. He took a deep breath and calmed himself down. He slowly said, "It seems that I will have to personally deal with these juniors." Elder Liang was considered City Lord Mei's #1 confidant among the elders of Descending Star City. When he heard City Lord Mei's words, he immediately asked, "City Lord, what happened?" City Lord Mei glanced at the mirror in his hand and said, "Those juniors are trying to break the restriction that I set up." What? Elder Liang was shocked. They are only at the core formation stage. How can they break the restriction? Isn't this like throwing an egg against a rock? Elder Liang's words were not flattering in the slightest. Instead, he was flattering City Lord Mei, which made City Lord Mei feel comfortable. However, it was only for a moment. It was true that it was difficult for core formation stage cultivators to break a nascent soul cultivator's restriction. The difference in cultivation level was not that easy to overcome. However, it was a different story if one of them was extremely proficient in formations. These juniors are different from ordinary core formation stage cultivators. I really don't know if we are lucky or unlucky. If he could devour all of them, then his Yuan Mo's strength would increase rapidly. This was naturally good luck. However, if something unexpected happened because of these people, then he would suffer a great loss. Although this ancient mystic ground was a disguise, the items inside were the real deal. He had moved from the real ancient secret place to this disorienting cave to raise primordial devil. If it was destroyed just like that, he could not allow this to happen. Emotinga stared at the scattered people in front of her, lost in thought. In the end, they still couldn't find the last person. This cave was too big, and there were too many forks in the road. Under the situation where everyone had consumed too many pills, they could no longer continue searching. Among the 8 of them, Jin Shi and the other 2 had already exhausted all of their pills. Yong and Chiu were not much better off. In the process of encountering the puppets, they had expended too much energy, causing them to be injured. Right now, only Shi Wuxiang and Jinshin still had their strength intact. Under such circumstances, Jinshin made a suggestion. Since time didn't allow for it, then they would cut off all means of retreat, break through this cave, and leave. Upon hearing this suggestion, Emotinga wrinkled her brows. It wasn't that this suggestion was completely unfeasible, but it was easier said than done to break through this cave. That monster was in this cave, and the crisis was right in front of them. She was afraid that before they could break through the cave, the monster would find them. Nia Wuxiang was very happy with this suggestion. This situation where they couldn't advance or retreat made her feel suffocated, so she was willing to take a gamble. As for the others, since they had no other choice, they tacitly agreed with Jinshin's suggestion. That being the case, Emotinga could only accept it. Although she felt this matter wasn't easy to handle, the facts were in front of her. Apart from this, there was no other way. This was a stupid idea, but at least they could try, so they might as well take a gamble. Just as she was thinking, Jinshin opened his eyes and asked, "Has everyone rested enough?" Everyone stopped to adjust their breathing. Yongryu nodded and said, "I'm fine." Emotinga and Nia Wuxiang also nodded. Mushi hesitated for a moment and said, "Yu Gui and I don't have any more medicinal pills." At this point, he looked at everyone's reaction with some worry. In this kind of situation, Without medicinal pills meant they couldn't recover their devil aura. So once their devil aura was exhausted, they would be useless to the team. Mo Tiange understood what Mushi was worried about. She looked at Jianxin and the others and said faintly, "Let's take one step at a time and see when the time comes." Jianshi glanced at his two brothers and sighed helplessly. They weren't strong enough, and they didn't have enough medicinal pills. The three of them already had no right to speak in this team. A day ago, a total of 15 core formation cultivators entered this place. Among them, 10 were devil cultivators and only 5 were Dao cultivators. But now, all the Dao cultivators were alive, and only the 3 of them were devil cultivators. Moreover, they were in a passive position. It had to be said that although devil cultivators were strong, they were not as good as Dao cultivators in terms of adaptability. "Let's go." Jianxin took the lead to stand up and led everyone to one of the passages. Among everyone present, his cultivation level was the highest, and he also seemed to have his own opinions. Unconsciously, he became everyone's leader. Mo Tiange and Nie Wuxiang didn't object to this. On one hand, they were convinced that Jianxin was a truly capable person, and he had already shown his superb judgment. On the other hand, they didn't have a better way. The calmness Jianxin displayed just happened to stabilize the team's morale. After walking for a short distance, Jianxin stopped in front of a passage. "This is it." "Why here?" Nie Wuxiang asked. She really couldn't feel any difference between this passage and the others. Jianxin didn't answer immediately. Instead, his gaze fell on Mo Tiange. Mo Tiange wrinkled her brows. She shook her sleeves and summoned the 8 trigrams diagram of Tai Chi. Spiritual light flowed on the diagram. Following the flow of spiritual aura, Mo Tiange couldn't help but exclaim in astonishment. "What's wrong?" Nie Wuxiang asked. Mo Tiange shook her head and put away the 8 trigrams diagram of Tai Chi. She said, "The spiritual aura fluctuation here is more violent than in other places. If someone laid a restriction in this cave, making it impossible for us to go out, then this place is probably a node." Oh, Nie Wuxiang didn't understand the Tao of formations and restrictions very well, so she just responded. Mo Tiange looked at Jianxin with admiration in her eyes. "Fellow Taoist, Jianxin's strength is really extraordinary. You actually saw the key point at a glance." Although she looked like this, she was secretly vigilant in her heart. She admitted that although her formation-laying technique wasn't good enough, her attainments in formations weren't inferior to specialized formation masters. However, in this place, she was burdened by her realm, so she still couldn't find the location of the restriction in this cave. This Jianxin was actually this strong. Jianxin glanced at her. His gaze seemed to have sensed something, so he smiled faintly and said, "I'm not proficient in the Tao of formations. I just have a treasure in my hand. Previously, I couldn't fight it alone, but now that there are 8 of us, we can fight it." His tone changed. "All right, this is an emergency. We shouldn't waste any more time. That monster might catch up to us at any time." Mo Tiange nodded. She put away the heaven and earth fan and took out a flying sword from her Qianquan bag. "Fellow Taoist Jianxin, what should we do?" Nie Wuxiang asked as she tightened her gloves. Jianxin stared at the stone wall in front of him and said, "Our realm isn't high enough, so we can only use brute force to destroy it. Everyone just needs to attack this stone wall. When our strength accumulates to a certain extent, we can forcibly destroy this node, and a hole will appear in the hole restriction. At that time, we'll take the opportunity to escape." "Understood." Nie Wuxiang nodded and threw a punch first. The stone wall shook and made a loud noise as if it was cracked. However, after several breaths, it still stood stably. "Continue," Jianxin said. He then shook his sleeves, and the sword on his back was unsheathed. A brilliant light suddenly appeared, and a swift and fierce sword aura assaulted Mo Tiange's face. Mo Tiange was slightly startled. Such a swift and fierce sword aura. This Jianxin turned out to be a sword cultivator. She didn't know why, but the number of sword cultivators in Yunzhong was much fewer than in the Celestial Pole. Perhaps it was because it wasn't easy for sword cultivators to advance to the next realm, and the cultivators in Yunzhong pursued higher realms than in the Celestial Pole? Emotienga let her imagination run wild, but her hands didn't stop moving. She also took out her flying sword and slashed at the stone wall. Upon seeing this, Yong and Xiao, as well as Jin Shi's group of 3, none of them stayed out of the fight. Each of them displayed their own skills and attacked the stone wall with all their might. They'd already encountered the monster several times. Each time, they managed to escape safely, but their spiritual aura was constantly being consumed. Moreover, that monster would accurately find them every 2 to 4 hours. For the 5 of them, now was the time to truly fight with their lives on the line. They either ran out of medicinal pills or were injured. If they couldn't break the restriction before the monster found them, the fate that awaited them was self-evident. As for Emotienga, Nie Wuxiang and Jianxin, if the 5 of them were swallowed, the monster would become stronger, and it would be even harder for them to escape. Everyone was fighting with all their might, not being stingy with their spiritual aura. Big brother, my devil aura is almost used up. Yu Gui put away his magic weapon and whispered to Jin Shi. Emotienga hesitated for a moment before she took out a jade bottle from her Qingkuan bag. She then turned around and threw it to them. These are my medicinal pills. Although they're not devil pills, you should be able to use them. Make do. Jin Shi took the bottle and looked at her gratefully. Thank you. Devil cultivators like them absorb spiritual aura a bit more slowly than devil aura. But in a situation where they didn't have devil pills, they could still replenish their devil aura with spiritual pills. Once the 8 of them ran out of spiritual aura, they would sit in meditation and take medicinal pills. Once they recovered, they would immediately continue. This was a matter of life and death, so none of them dared to be negligent for even a moment. Nearly 2 hours later, a rumbling sound rang out. Nie Wuxiang threw a punch. Finally, the stone wall trembled, and a ray of light appeared on its surface, showing that there was an invisible barrier here. Emotienga was delighted. It's working. Let's continue. Originally, they couldn't see this restriction. Based on the slight spiritual aura fluctuations, they determined that there should be a node of the restriction here. Now that the ray of light appeared, it confirmed their judgment and also showed that their operation this time was indeed feasible. Seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, the others also looked happy and immersed themselves in their work. However, at this time, Nie Wuxiang suddenly stopped. That monster is coming. Chapter 414. Among Jin Shi and the others, Yu Gui looked panicked. Big brother, what should we do? Jin Shi glared at him and continued to attack the stone wall. What else can we do? Keep going. The others paused for a moment then sped up. This won't do. Only Jianxin said, we have to stop it otherwise. But what can we use to stop it? Yong Ryu said anxiously, whether it's spells or weapons, they're useless against that monster. Jianxin's gaze fell on Emotienga with a pensive expression. Fellow Taoist Qin, your magic weapon. Emotienga understood what he meant, so she said, my magic weapon isn't powerful enough, but it's good at defending. Maybe we can try. Jianxin was very satisfied with her initiative. He nodded and said nothing more. Emotienga hesitated for a moment then reached her waist and released all 3 spiritual beasts, including Feifei, who wasn't good at attacking. You 3, attack the restriction with all your strength. Feifei was fine, but Xiaofan and Xiaohua were released with great difficulty. They were just about to come up when they heard such an order, blinking their eyes in confusion. Emotienga said again, don't take it lightly. This is a matter of life and death, understand? Yes, master. Xiaofan answered obediently then turned around to attack the restriction. Xiaohua, seeing that Emotienga was ignoring it, whimpered aggrievedly then followed Xiaofan. Feifei, on the other hand, didn't say anything and started to help attack the restriction. Seeing her 3 spiritual beasts, the others widened their eyes and looked at her in surprise. 3 spiritual beasts, all of them in the 5th rank, and one of them could speak. This was really shocking. Emotienga sighed inwardly. She knew this was a bit ostentatious, so she only released 1 spiritual beast at most. Now that things had come to a head, she had no choice but to do this. If they could escape, Castellan May would definitely not let them go. Even if they were greedy, they wouldn't have a chance. Only Jinxin and Nie Wuxiang were a bit surprised. The monster's breath was getting closer and closer. Mo Tiange took out several magic weapons. Fellow Taoist Qin, Jinxin shouted from behind her. Go and stop it now. It's best if you can lure that monster away. If you can't, I'll help you. Got it. Luring them away was indeed a good idea, but it involved two problems. First, it was trust. If she led the others away, and they broke the restriction without informing her, she would fall behind. And then, City Lord Mei would find out that she was the unlucky one. However, with Nie Wuxiang here, she was willing to believe him this once. The second problem was whether or not the monster could be lured away. After all, there were so many people here. As long as it had some intelligence, it should be able to give up as many as it could. However, this was also uncertain. Who knew what this thing was? Perhaps it had no intelligence at all, only instincts. Mo Tiange tossed these thoughts to the back of her mind, then walked out of the passage with the restriction node and headed in the direction the monster came from. When Mo Tiange saw this monster, she was shocked. This monster's aura was surging, and it was actually much stronger than what they had seen before. Strange, those demonic cultivators who had been turned into puppets were all killed by them. So how could this monster become stronger? Could it be that there was something strange in this cave? She didn't have much time to think. The monster had already discovered her and stopped in front of her, its strange aura surging. Without hesitation, Mo Tiange waved the heaven and earth fan. Countless flowers, grass, and leaves flew out of it and rolled into a ball. However, they didn't roll towards the monster, but fell around it and wrapped it up. Direct attack wouldn't work. This was something they had verified, and Nie Wuxiang also indirectly proved it. That being the case, they could only try not to make direct contact with it. Only in this way could they avoid spiritual aura being absorbed by it. Seeing these flowers, grass, and leaves with spiritual aura scattered around it, the monster was indeed confused. It stood in place for a while at a loss before it tried to move forward again. In its opinion, although there were countless scattered spiritual auras around it, they weren't as delicious as the cultivator in front of it. But Mo Tiange didn't give it this chance. As soon as it moved, the heaven and earth fan immediately waved, and the flowers and grass around it rolled up again. They still scattered around it without moving forward or backward, but they coincided with the position of the 8 trigrams, forming a simple formation. The monster paused again, as if it didn't know where to go. Mo Tiange wasn't an expert formation master, so she couldn't be like Tian Jiqian, who could instantly lay an invisible formation. Her formation could only confuse this monster, making it unable to see the spiritual aura situation in its surroundings for a while. Originally, she was worried that this monster was invisible and didn't know whether the formation would work on it or not. But after seeing its reaction, she felt a little relieved. At least, the direction in which this monster sensed spiritual aura was similar to cultivators, so this formation could also confuse it. However, after several times, the monster simply stopped moving. It stayed in place for a while, then floated forward along the passage. Mo Tiange was shocked. She wanted to continue laying the formation, but Feifei's voice suddenly appeared in her mind. It's useless, master. This thing is stupid, but its intuition is very accurate. You can't confuse it forever. By the time it finished speaking, Feifei had already run over from behind. Mo Tiange saw it coming but didn't ask anything. She knew Feifei was very smart, so smart that it could judge the situation by itself. She said, "Do you recognize this thing?" Feifei shook its head. "Master, my memory isn't omnipotent. I just feel that this thing has the aura of the distant past." The aura of the distant past. Mo Tiange couldn't help but think of those sacrificial temples. Cultivation techniques came from stone tablets. Stone tablets came from sacrificial temples, and sacrificial temples were born in the distant past. In that case, it wasn't strange for Feifei to feel the aura of the distant past. She didn't have time to think too much. The monster was already very close to her, so she couldn't attack it directly. A simple formation also couldn't trap it, So Mo Tiange was in a dilemma. Boom! Nie Wuxiang's heavy punch landed on the stone wall's restriction. The restriction swayed and flashed with light, but it still managed to hold on. She anxiously turned her head to look. In fact, from this angle, she couldn't see the monster. However, she had a treasure on her, so she was much more sensitive to this monster's aura than others. She could clearly feel that Mo Tiange was having a hard time resisting it. Fellow Taoist Jinxin. She turned her head and called out to Jinxin, fellow Taoist Qin. Jinxin was still controlling his flying sword, concentrating on attacking the restriction. Although he was only in the middle stage of the core formation realm, his cultivation level was much higher than Mo Tiange's and Nie Wuxiang's, who had just advanced to the core formation realm. Moreover, he was also a sword cultivator, so the flying sword in his hand shone brightly and was extremely powerful. After retrieving his flying sword, Jinxin swallowed a medicinal pill. He then glanced at Nie Wuxiang and said faintly, "This restriction can't hold on much longer. We have to hurry. When fellow Taoist Qin retreats here, I'll go and help her." Nie Wuxiang still wanted to say something, but in the end, she swallowed her words. She didn't really trust this Jinxin, but what he said wasn't unreasonable. This restriction was already on the verge of collapse. Maybe one attack could break it, and Jinxin's attack power was the strongest among them, so it'd be best if he could stay here. However, when she thought of Mo Tiange, who was holding on by herself, she clenched her teeth and sped up her movements. Mo Tiange retreated step by step. Even with Feifei's help, she still felt powerless. She didn't know why, but this monster's aura was a lot stronger than before. When they encountered each other before, no matter how she attacked it, it would always return to its original state. This time, however, it could even counterattack. With Ren Yufeng's experience, she didn't dare to directly come into contact with these auras. Who knew what was strange about these auras? As a result, she could only be slowly pushed back by this monster. Fellow Taoist Jinxin. Seeing that she was about to be pushed back to the passage where the restriction was located, Mo Tiange clenched her teeth and shouted, "I can't hold on anymore. Please come and help me." Jinxin naturally heard her plea for help, but he still didn't stop moving his hands. He simply said, "Fellow Taoist, hold on a little longer. We're almost there." Upon hearing this answer, Mo Tiange couldn't help but feel annoyed. She said, "How can I hold on by myself?" Nie Wuxiang also turned around and said, "Fellow Taoist Jinxin, this?" Jinxin was indifferent. He coldly glanced at her and said, "This is a crucial moment. I won't leave. If you go and help her, it'll be the same." Nie Wuxiang was also angry. "You said you'd help her, but now you're actually going back on your word." Jinxin's tone was indifferent. "Say whatever you want. If she dies and we can all escape, it'll be worth it." "You." Nie Wuxiang was seething with anger. She raised her fist, almost wanting to kill Jinxin first. However, her reason reminded her that even if she killed this person now, it wouldn't help at all. She looked around. The other 5 people were all attacking in silence. No one was willing to say anything. Nie Wuxiang couldn't help but sneer. In the past day or so, the 2 of them could be said to have given these 5 people a lot of advice. However, in front of their lives, they wouldn't come forward. She clenched her teeth, gave up on continuing to attack the restriction, and turned around to leave. Fellow Taoist Tiancan. At this time, Jinxin's voice came from behind her. "According to my estimation, another cup of tea's time should be enough. Just hold on." Nie Wuxiang paused for a moment. She glared at him, then immediately ran towards Mo Tiange. Mo Tiange had already heard their conversation a moment ago, so she was also very angry in her heart. These past few years, she encountered a lot of things, but there were only a few people like Jinxin. You really couldn't judge a book by its cover. This person looked very opinionated, and he didn't seem like a person who would go back on his word. However, she didn't expect that when things came to a head, he would act like this. However, her thoughts were the same as Nie Wuxiang's. Although Jinxin had the intention of abandoning her, now wasn't the time to turn hostile. If she really persisted for another 10 minutes, she would be able to break the restriction. In that case, she could give it her all. However, The current situation wasn't optimistic, and they didn't know whether their efforts were worth it or not. Nie Wuxiang ran over and saw the monster's current appearance. She was shocked. How could it become so powerful? Mo Tiange shook her head. How could she know? Upon seeing Nie Wuxiang's extremely depressed appearance, she asked, "What's wrong?" After a long time, Nie Wuxiang finally exhaled and said helplessly, "This thing's already this powerful. I can't stop it." Mo Tiange was stunned. Among them, the one who was most familiar with this thing was Nie Wuxiang. If even she couldn't do anything, wouldn't that mean they could only let this monster swallow them all? After hesitating for a while, Nie Wuxiang's eyes revealed a resolute expression. Since that's the case, we can only do this. Chapter 415. What are these brats trying to do? City Lord Mei muttered to himself as he stared at the mirror. These juniors were not ordinary core formation cultivators, and needed to be more careful. However, he found it interesting to see how busy they were inside the lost cave. He couldn't help but want to see how far they could go. In any case, up until now, everything was still under his control. He already knew that they wanted to break the restriction, but he didn't think much of it. It wasn't difficult to repair a single node of the restriction. Once the restriction was broken, and someone escaped from the lost cave, he would immediately capture that person and feed him to the original devil. No matter how strong a few core formation cultivators were, he didn't need to worry about them. Although the difference between core formation and nascent soul was only one level, the difference was like heaven and earth. Right now, the progress of the lost cave was still under his control. He already knew what these people were trying to do, so he naturally prepared for it. However, as he watched, one of the brats puzzled him. Rather than calling it a brat, it was actually a girl. When Elder Liang brought the two girls back to the city lord residence, he discovered this. However, this wasn't a big deal. It wasn't strange for a girl to disguise herself as a man. However, he was still a little surprised. Although these two girls had ordinary cultivations, they had quite a number of spiritual treasures on them. They did not look like ordinary cultivators. Furthermore, their performance in the disorienting cave was indeed remarkable. If it wasn't for the fact that these two cultivated Dao techniques, and had nothing to do with him, he would have taken them in as disciples. But now, the girl dressed as a man was blocking his original devil, as if she wanted to do something. What could she do? Could it be that they still didn't understand their situation? All attacks that involved spiritual energy and demonic energy were useless against the original devil. Even if the original devil's aura was temporarily dispersed, it could quickly recover. They had nowhere to run inside the lost cave. Logically, City Lord Mei didn't think that the girl could do anything. However, when he thought of this, his eyebrows twitched uncontrollably. He rubbed his brows and thought to himself, "Is this an illusion?" They were just a few core formation cultivators. With him personally watching over them, what kind of accident could happen? However, in the next moment, he abruptly stood up, and his face turned pale. How could this be? His reaction shocked the surrounding descending Star City core formation cultivators. Elder Liang hurriedly came forward and called out in fear, "City Lord." However, City Lord Mei didn't pay any attention to him. She snorted coldly and threw the mirror in her hand to the ground. Then, she shook her sleeves and flew towards the teleportation array. In an instant, she disappeared into the teleportation array. Elder Liang was puzzled as he watched City Lord Mei disappear. Then he lowered his head to look at the mirror. When he saw the scene in the mirror, an incomparably shocked expression appeared on his face. In the mirror, Nie Wuxiang's entire body was shrouded by a black aura. This black aura was very different from devil aura, as if it had a life of its own and was surging non-stop. Just this scene alone wasn't something to be surprised about. Perhaps this Tian was just a demonic cultivator who had concealed himself extremely well. But what made Elder Liang incredulous was that the primal demon, which core formation cultivators like them didn't dare to approach, actually moved back in fear when it saw her. How was this possible? Elder Liang was endlessly shocked. He was the #1 confidant of the city lord. He was very clear about the process in which the city lord obtained a new cultivation technique and created the primal demon. This thing had completely surpassed the concept of demonic cultivators in this day and age. It was far more advanced than the devil aura on their bodies. Because of this, the devil aura on the city lord's body was gradually restrained. It had reached the realm where it could be released from his heart. If one didn't cultivate a special cultivation technique like the city lord, they would be swallowed the moment they got close to it, let alone control it. But what he saw in front of him clearly wasn't the case. The city lord had nurtured this primal demon for so long. If it could swallow all these core formation cultivators, it would be able to help the city lord reach the heavens in a single step. But now, it was actually being absorbed by someone else. The more Elder Liang thought about it, the more frightened he felt. Cold sweat dripped down uncontrollably. The reason why they dared to do such a thing was because they had no other choice but to swear loyalty to the city lord. It was also because this plan was meticulous. If it succeeded, they would be like dogs and chickens rising to the heavens if they followed the city lord. But now, if the primal demon was swallowed by someone else, could the city lord's plan still be realized? If the city lord couldn't advance to become a peak-level warrior, how long could Descending Star City survive? Almost all of these people were brought into the city lord's residence by him. Although there were some who didn't have any background, there were many who had strong backing. At least it involved the major sects in Eastern Tang, and one of the 3 demon territories in Northern Lin Kingdom. As a nascent soul realm cultivator, the city lord might be able to give up everything and escape. But what about the core formation cultivators? Could they escape the pursuit of the major sects and the demon territories? Brother Liang, what's wrong? Seeing the city lord leave in a rage, and noticing his abnormal behavior, the other elders of Descending Star City, who were standing slightly further away, were slightly terrified. They moved closer and asked softly. Elder Liang wiped the sweat off his face and shook his head. Nothing. He didn't dare to say anything now. It was still unknown whether or not the city lord would be able to subdue these core formation cultivators. If the city lord succeeded in the end, and they escaped in advance, then the city lord wouldn't let them go. At this point, for the sake of his own life and future, he could only hope that the city lord could stop this matter and subdue all these core formation cultivators. Ignorant Junior! A shout resounded in the cave. The voice was full of anger. Next, the 8 people felt a powerful aura rushing towards them. Yong Ryu was the first to panic. This is the aura of a nascent soul realm cultivator. A nascent soul realm cultivator actually appeared here. Jianqing paused for a moment, then shouted sternly, "Continue." But Yong Ryu's heart was in a mess. There's a nascent soul realm cultivator here. How could we? Pa! With a crisp sound, a strong wind hit Yong Ryu's cheek. Jianqing said angrily, "If you want to die, I'll fulfill your wish right now." Senior Marshal Brother! Qiu Chenghua cried out in fear and rushed forward. Jianqing coldly glanced at her, then continued to attack the restriction. That nascent soul realm cultivator's main target wasn't them. They still had a chance to live. Of course, if these 2 people couldn't accomplish anything and caused everyone to be unable to get out, he didn't mind killing them right now. When City Lord Mei's thin figure appeared in front of the 2 of them, Nie Wuxiang was already speechless. Right now, her whole body was wrapped in black aura, and the primordial devil aura in her body was extremely powerful. Even her spiritual aura was completely swallowed by the primordial devil aura. Mo Tiange couldn't tell whether she swallowed the primordial devil aura or was swallowed by the primordial devil aura. But Nie Wuxiang definitely wouldn't be able to move for a while. What should they do now? Seeing that primordial devil aura had already merged with Nie Wuxiang, City Lord Mei was so angry that she trembled. Her youthful face twisted as she glared at the 2 of them fiercely. "You 2 actually ruined my painstaking efforts." Right after she said that, she threw a punch at the stone wall, smashing it into pieces. The whole cave shook along with City Lord Mei's movements. Jianqing saw a flash of light on the restriction, and his face was filled with joy. "Hurry up. The restriction will be broken soon." City Lord May's angry action just now happened to give them a helping hand. Without much time to think, Mo Tiange waved the white silk handkerchief and stood in front of City Lord May. She then quietly put Nie Wuxiang behind her. She knew she couldn't defeat a nascent soul cultivator, but at this moment, it was impossible for her to ignore Nie Wuxiang. Nie Wuxiang trusted her. Mo Tiange clearly knew that after absorbing the primordial devil aura, she would lose her ability for a while, but she still did it. Mo Tiange didn't want to betray this kind of trust. City Lord May stared at the two of them and revealed an evil smile. What? You still want to be my enemy? Humph. Overestimating your capabilities. Mo Tiange was very calm. She always had this kind of ability. The more dangerous the situation was, the calmer she became. Holding her magic weapon in her hand, she looked straight at City Lord May and said with a flat tone, "It's not that we want to be enemies with City Lord May, but City Lord May schemed against me first. Our lives are at stake, so even if our strength is inferior, we can only fight." City Lord May was stunned when she heard what she said. She then raised her head and laughed loudly. "Only fight? You little girl are really interesting. Unfortunately, no matter how interesting you are, I can only feed you to the primordial devil aura." Once he finished speaking, he fiercely glared at Nie Wuxiang. "Humph. You want to swallow my primordial devil aura? Dream on. I'm going to eat you too." City Lord May waved her sleeves and walked towards them with large strides. A nascent soul cultivator against a core formation cultivator was a battle without any suspense. So City Lord May wasn't worried at all. What he was worried about was whether he could get his primordial devil aura back after it was absorbed by this little girl. According to reason, as long as the primordial devil aura still existed, he should be able to absorb it. After all, he was a nascent soul cultivator, while this little girl was only a core formation cultivator. It was impossible for her to compete with him. However, this kind of thing had never happened before, so it was hard to be certain. Seeing that City Lord May was ignoring her, she wanted to directly grab Nie Wuxiang. Mo Tiange's gaze turned cold. She opened the lotus scarlet umbrella and blocked City Lord May's path. City Lord May was slightly astonished when she saw her actions. "Little girl, do you really want to stop me?" He hadn't seen a cultivator like this for many years. She was already in the core formation realm, and her strength wasn't weak at all. This junior should know the gap between nascent soul and core formation, right? Mo Tiange didn't say anything. The lotus scarlet umbrella purified the spiritual aura around her body and blocked the devil aura emitted by City Lord May. She then moved her hand and threw something. Rumble! After a loud explosion, City Lord May flung his sleeves and coldly stared at Mo Tiange. "Humph. Although your magic weapon is intelligent, you're only a core formation cultivator in the end. Do you think you can injure me like this?" His gaze turned cold. He made a hand seal and devil aura gathered between his fingers, ready to attack Mo Tiange. Mo Tiange focused. She knew the spirit cloud's Rui couldn't repel a nascent soul cultivator, but it was good to buy some time. Rumble! Before City Lord May's devil aura could attack, another loud explosion was heard. Soon after, Qiu Chunruo's pleasantly surprised voice rang out. "The restriction is broken." Chapter 416. Under the covetous gaze of a nascent soul cultivator, Mo Tiange knew it would be very difficult, almost impossible, to escape unscathed. However, at this moment, even if she didn't stand in front of Nie Wuxiang, City Lord May still wouldn't let her go. That being the case, she might as well stake it all. Mo Tiange was confident that she still had a chance. Once the restriction was broken, the others didn't stop and escaped one after another. In the blink of an eye, the atmosphere around them disappeared. City Lord May snorted coldly and said disdainfully, "Juniors, I'll let you roam freely for a while." In his opinion, killing these two little girls in front of him was only a matter of time. Once he was free, killing these people would be as easy as flipping his hand. If they wanted to escape, then let them escape. In any case, they couldn't escape from his palm. With this thought in mind, City Lord May's gaze turned cold. Her right hand suddenly turned into a claw, and suddenly extended to grab Emotienga. Right at that moment, a sharp whistling sound was heard. A talisman appeared in Emotienga's hand, and turned into a dazzling white light, attacking City Lord May. The aura of a nascent soul cultivator. City Lord May was shocked. How could it have the aura of a nascent soul cultivator? Could it be that this little girl? No, it was only a talisman that sealed the power of a nascent soul cultivator's magic weapon? After realizing this, he felt relieved. It seems this little girl's identity is also extraordinary. She actually has such a treasure. However, the power released by the talisman greatly astonished City Lord May. This kind of power was no different from a real nascent soul cultivator's attack. How was this possible? Taking advantage of City Lord May dodging, Emotienga grabbed Nie Wuxiang and ran towards the place where the restriction was broken. On the way, she didn't forget to put the spiritual beasts into her spiritual beast pouch. No matter how smart Feifei was, it was useless at this time. Although Xiaofan and Xiaohua could help, they would lose their lives if they were careless in the hands of a nascent soul cultivator. That being the case, she might as well put them into her spiritual beast pouch and escape. Even if she couldn't escape, they could at most become other people's spiritual beasts. Junior, where do you think you're going? City Lord May shouted. However, the power of that talisman was extraordinary. By the time she got rid of it, Emotienga had already escaped from the place where the restriction was broken. City Lord May was extremely angry. She had thought that there were only a few core formation cultivators, but she had underestimated them in the end. City Lord May coldly snorted as she thought of this. She waved her sleeves and flew out of the place where the restriction had been broken. She was too naive to think that she could escape from his heart with just a talisman. Once she jumped out of the cave, Emotienga swept her gaze around and discovered that several people who escaped earlier than them were currently fighting with core formation cultivators from Descending Star City. She snorted coldly in her heart. Although these people weren't her enemies, they used her and Nie Wuxiang to stall City Lord May while they escaped. They really weren't good companions. Since that was the case, she would not be meddlesome even if these people were stopped. Instead, she was elated. As such, these Descending Star City cultivators all had a target, and no one stopped her. Of course, even so, she might not be able to escape, because behind her was the only nascent soul cultivator. That talisman was something she prepared for Qin Shi before she left. Although it had the power of a nascent soul cultivator's magic weapon, it wasn't a real nascent soul cultivator's attack. In just a moment, City Lord May would be able to escape. It could be said that City Lord May's situation was the most serious. Time was of the essence. She searched her Qianquan bag and took out the land-shrinking ruler she got from Mo Yaoqing. In terms of speed, even if she had a top-grade flying magic weapon, cloud-treading boots, she still wouldn't be able to get rid of a nascent soul cultivator. She could only use her magic weapon to increase the distance between them, and then think of a way to enter the virtual sky world. Where do you think you're going? City Lord May shouted angrily behind her. Emotienga's heart skipped a beat, and a wave of despair welled up in her heart. She actually didn't even have a chance to use the land-shrinking ruler? Nevertheless, even if she felt even more despair, she wouldn't resign herself to death. Seeing City Lord May aggressively rushing out, Emotienga unfolded the heaven and earth fan in her hand, using offense as defense, and unceremoniously counterattacked. Upon seeing this, City Lord May was so angry that she actually laughed. You're just a grain of rice, yet you dare to compete under the sun and the moon? Right after she finished speaking, she shook her arms, and the devil aura that was originally well restrained suddenly surged out. It was several times more powerful than Elder Liang and the others. Even Nie Wuxiang, who was currently surrounded by primordial devil aura, couldn't compare to it. It was only now that City Lord May truly revealed her strength. A nascent soul cultivator, even if she was only in the early stage of the nascent soul realm, wasn't someone core formation cultivators like them could resist. Nevertheless, Emotienga clenched her teeth, unwilling to retreat. As soon as they arrived in Starfall City, They'd already stepped into City Lord May's trap. Right now, they had no other way out but to fight. Therefore, she risked her serious injuries and used the power of her magic weapon, spiritual talisman, and the heaven and earth fan to meet them. City Lord May sneered. She already knew the power of the magic weapon and spiritual talisman in Emotinga's hands, so she chose to dodge for the time being. At the same time, she didn't forget to use her devil aura to block their way. Right at this moment, a clanging sound was heard. It was as if a sharp weapon had been unsheathed. Soon after, it emitted a sharp whistling sound as it pierced towards City Lord May. City Lord May dodged Emotinga's magic weapon and spiritual talisman, while preventing them from taking the opportunity to escape. It wasn't until the sword aura enveloped her that she realized someone was sneak attacking her from behind. Who is it? City Lord May's face twisted in anger. Which brat actually dared to sneak attack a nascent soul cultivator like her? What made her even more furious was that this person's sword aura was soundless. While she was distracted, she actually didn't notice it. At this moment, Emotinga couldn't help but be startled when she saw Jinshin standing not too far behind her. Although she'd only known this Jinshin for several hours in the cave, and didn't know much about him, his previous way of doing things really made her dislike him. He asked her to block the monster, but in the end, he refused to lend her a helping hand. Clearly, he only had benefits in his eyes, and was extremely selfish. But now, he unexpectedly didn't take the opportunity to escape, and instead helped her? Jinshin merely glanced at her coldly, then waved his hand, once again creating thousands upon thousands of sword auras, which ruthlessly attacked City Lord May. Now wasn't the time to investigate the reason. Emotinga clenched her teeth, took out a handful of magic weapons and spiritual talismans from her sleeve, then threw them all out. Every magic weapon and spiritual talisman, made by a nascent soul cultivator, was extremely precious. Any core formation cultivator who got their hands on them would treasure them as their last life-saving measure. Emotinga didn't even count them. She directly grabbed a handful and threw them out. There were 7 or 8 of them. If other core formation cultivators saw this, they would definitely feel extremely distressed. Emotinga naturally felt distressed. Before she left, her master and Qin, she both prepared magic weapons and spiritual talismans for her. However, these things were precious. Even if the 2 nascent soul cultivators weren't stingy, she only had a dozen or so talismans on her. After this round of throwing, she only had 2 or 3 left. No matter how precious an item was, it couldn't be more precious than her life. At this moment, as long as she could preserve her life, she wouldn't be stingy even if she had to give up all the treasures she had. The light from the magic weapons and spiritual talismans shone, shining together with the light from Jinshin's sword aura. For a moment, the sky was filled with dazzling rays of light. The spiritual aura in the surroundings was even more intense and turbulent. City Lord May bellowed in the light, "You juniors!" Relying on his high cultivation level, he thought it would be easy to capture them. But unexpectedly, he was repeatedly plotted against by these juniors. City Lord May was trapped in the spiritual aura and couldn't escape for a while. As for the other cultivators in Descending Star City, under the power of these nascent soul cultivators' magic weapons and spiritual talismans, their hands and feet were tied. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Emotinga didn't think too much about it. She pulled Nia Wushang, held the land-shrinking ruler, and rapidly fled into the distance. The situation was urgent, so she had to run a certain distance to give herself time to use the land-shrinking ruler. As soon as the land-shrinking ruler was activated, City Lord May would have to spend some time to find her. At that time, she could use that short period of time to enter the virtual sky world. Just as she fled, City Lord May escaped from the magic weapons and spiritual talismans. His eyes were burning with anger as he stared furiously in the direction Emotinga disappeared. He waved the devil aura around his body and immediately turned into a black flight light, chasing after Emotinga. He couldn't care less about the others. It didn't matter if the others escaped or died. The most important thing now was to capture the little girl who had swallowed his yuan mo and dismember the other junior, to vent the hatred in his heart. As for whether he could advance to the late stage of the nascent soul realm in one fell swoop, he couldn't care less now. In the worst case, he was a nascent soul cultivator. At worst, he could abandon descending Star City and escape by himself. Thinking up to this point, City Lord May once again gnashed his teeth in hatred. His plan was foolproof. If he hadn't met these juniors, he would have finished cultivating his primordial devil. As long as he swallowed it, he would be able to advance to the late stage of the nascent soul realm in one fell swoop, and become a top cultivator in Yunzhong. At that time, he could build Descending Star City into a powerful force not inferior to the three devil territories, and become one of the top cultivators in Yunzhong, who could call the wind and summon the rain. But now, he didn't know if he could take back his primordial devil, and he couldn't swallow all of these core formation cultivators. Emo Tienga didn't even have the time to turn her head to look. Based on the momentum behind her, she already knew City Lord May had caught up to her. Fortunately, the land-shrinking ruler could increase her speed, and the cloud-treading boots were top-grade magic weapons. City Lord May wouldn't be able to catch up to her for a while if she fled with all her might. Nevertheless, the distance between the two of them was getting shorter and shorter. If this continued, she would eventually be caught by City Lord May, and it would be difficult for her to escape death. What should I do? Emo Tienga's mind raced. Junior, where do you think you're going? City Lord May's sharp voice rang out from behind her. A powerful devil aura rushed towards the two of them. Emo Tienga's brows twitched. She didn't expect City Lord May to be able to launch a devil aura attack from such a distance. Emo Tienga waved the white silk handkerchief, causing a fog to surround the two of them. She then took out a diamond talisman and slapped it on her body. Even if her chances of escaping alive were very small, she still had to fight until the end. She absolutely couldn't resign herself to death. Seeing the devil aura rushing towards her with a soaring momentum, Emo Tienga only had enough time to open the heaven and earth fan in her haste to block the devil aura behind her. She didn't have much hope in blocking it. Even if she had a lot of magic weapons, how could she possibly block the attack of a nascent soul cultivator? Even if she could survive this attack, she would most likely be seriously injured. Puff! The pain she expected came. A wave of power penetrated the white silk handkerchief's defense, the diamond talisman's protective cover, and the heaven and earth fan's obstruction, directly penetrating her chest. Her aura surged, and she couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood. Am I really going to die? This thought emerged in her mind. She had experienced so many dangerous situations, but none of them had made her feel as close to death as she did today. But she couldn't bear to die. How could she bear to die? Thousands of miles away in the celestial pole, there was still someone waiting for her to return. Ah! An unexpected scream rang out. It was City Lord May's voice. Emo Tienga endured the pain, and hurriedly turned her head to look. However, what she saw left her dumbfounded. City Lord May, who was still quite a distance away from her, had the devil aura all over her body curled into a ball. It seemed she was seriously injured. At that moment, the heaven and earth fan in her hand suddenly emitted an incomparably pure and powerful aura. Emo Tienga didn't have time to think. She turned her head and saw the bewildering trace fog not too far away. She pulled Nia Wushang, then ran towards that direction. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.